and why everyone in D.C. is eating sauerkraut. And Sky and Telescope editor Kelly Beatty helps us mark the summer solstice. Before we end the show with you and the big birthday industrial complex, should we really be shelling out thousands for a 2-year-old celebration? Weigh in next on BPR.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. A new order from the U.S. Supreme Court has further weakened the Federal Voting Rights Act in 7 states, mainly in the Midwest. NPR's Hansi Lo Wong reports the order comes out of a case about the landmark law's protections for disabled voters and voters who are unable to read or write.
The Supreme Court is leaving in place a lower court ruling that strikes down a key tool for protecting voters with a disability or an inability to read or write. That ruling applies to Arkansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Across the country, lawsuits by voters and advocacy groups have been the main way of enforcing the Voting Rights Act's protections for voters with a disability or inability to read or write. But last year, a ruling by a federal appeals panel agreed with a novel argument by Republican state officials in Arkansas that only the U.S. Attorney General has the right to sue to enforce that protection. The Supreme Court has now refused to review the panel's ruling. The move comes about 2 months after the Supreme Court's conservative supermajority weakened the Voting Rights Act's protections against racial discrimination and redistricting. Hansi Lo Wong, NPR News, Washington.
Vice President Vance is returning to the U.S. after holding the first high-level direct talks with Iranian representatives in Switzerland. The U.S. and Iran have agreed to set up a working group focused on the war in Lebanon. NPR's Greg Myrie says UN peacekeepers report there was no recorded shooting yesterday between Israel and Hezbollah fighters in Lebanon.
There was very heavy fighting Friday and Saturday. Israeli troops remain miles inside southern Lebanon. The Israeli leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, says Israel will keep troops there for as long as it takes, he says, to protect northern Israel. Hezbollah is also defiant, saying the war will not be settled until Israeli troops leave Lebanon.
NPR's Greg Myrie reporting. Pope Leo has made an urgent appeal to governments to focus on combating global hunger. He gave an address to the UN World Food Program and warned of a disintegrating world order. He added aid operations to help the poorest are essential for protecting the idea of the international community. NPR's Ruth Sherlock has more.
The international system, Leo said, is becoming disorderly and conflict-ridden and imbued by a prevailing sense of mistrust. He told the staff of the UN's World Food Programme in Rome that while aid and development projects become ensnared by politics and bureaucracy, weapons do not.
In effect, conflicts are fed more readily than people are nourished.
Pope Leo spoke of WFP's mission as essential to preventing humanitarian crises from deteriorating into irreversible collapse. In an era where agencies like WFP have seen budgets drastically slashed, he pressed governments to cut red tape and tear down the barriers that prevent aid from reaching those in need. Ruth Sherlock, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Although the numbers are still coming in, an analysis of the World Cup matches have contributed roughly $1 billion to the local economy, not to mention the creation of about 7,000 jobs and more than $70 million in tax revenue. Meanwhile, Scottish soccer fans, along with members of the Tartan Army, have presented a check for just over $3,000 to Spalding Rehab Hospital in Charlestown. That money is a thank you gesture for treating Justine Kelly, an American that works with Scottish Development International, who suffered a stroke last year. Boston Commons Frog Pond Wading Pool reopens for the summer tomorrow. You'll be able to get your bathing suit wet daily from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. through Labor Day. But do keep in mind that Frog Pond isn't the only place to cool off. There's also fountains on the Rose Kennedy Greenway. There's a nautical-themed spray ground at the Dorothy Curran Playground in South Boston. And there's the Ryan Wading Pool and Playground in Mattapan. Also, across the river, there's a playground and splash pad combo at the Alexander Kemp Playground in Cambridge. Lots of places to cool off. In sports, Red Sox continue their West Coast swing, open a series with the Rockies in Colorado tonight. It's an 8:40 start. World Cup matches are on tap today, one at 1, one at 5, one at 8, and one at 11 p.m. Rain will roll in later today, high in the upper 70s. More rain tomorrow, high 71. It is 76 degrees in Boston right now, 72 in Springfield. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, supporting books, radio, podcasts, film, television, theater, and more to bridge science and the humanities. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
You're listening to BPR on GBH and NEPM. I'm Fighting Crime podcast host Christina Quinn. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Marjorie will be back at the BPL tomorrow with Attorney General Andrea Campbell for Ask the AG. No tickets or RSVP required. And I'm sitting here right now with BPR executive producer Jamie Bologna. Hello, Jamie.
Hi, Christina. Oh my goodness, here we go. I'm not on the sound clips today. That's all Nicole Garcia. That's right, Mom and Dad are away. Which means there'll only be a slight dose of Trump in politics today. But I have recently, thanks to Matt Visor in The Atlantic, become obsessed with the algae bloom in the reflecting pool.
I think we will try to talk about the algae as much as possible because it seems like something you really want to talk about.
Well, there is. And actually, there's a breaking news chyron on CNN right now that says that the algae bloom is about to be named the Prime Minister of the UK.
So whoa, that's big news.
It'll be in charge of everything there pretty soon. No, we're gonna start today with office politics, not political politics, and a conversation about work, in person, at the office, remote from the Bahamas, or wherever you send your emails. 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text. As always, we're inspired by a number of pieces in the New York Times this morning and over the weekend. They report that in 2020, the pandemic banished workers from office. Yeah, we remember that, initially just for 2 weeks. And it changed the way we all work. Right. Many of us have returned, but remote workers abound. And every time we open the lines to hear about the benefits of remote work, you all call in and flood us with text about how great it is not to have to sit in soul-crushing traffic or interact with coworkers that you don't want to interact with, or change out of sweatpants. But labor economists actually crunch the numbers, so they claim, and the data is clear. It's not good for all of us to be so isolated. So again, the lines are open at 877-301-8970. Are you a remote work diehard? And if so, how do you get that much needed socialization? Maybe you get it in line at the grocery store instead of the water cooler. And if you're an office bee, like all of us here at BPR, what have you noticed about how it shapes how you work? Are we all just typing alone instead of bowling alone? That was a line in one of the New York Times articles. And what does it all mean for our well-being? Again, 877-301-8970. Christina, you work remote, right?
I do work remotely. And actually, so I was working here for GBH as a reporter when the pandemic started. And that was when we switched to remote work. And so I've essentially been working remotely ever since. I left. And then I was working for Spotify, working on a couple podcasts there, and then went to the Washington Post. The whole time I've been remote. And then, I would fly down to DC and connect with people there in person. And I will say, as much as I love remote work and as much as I love avoiding soul-crushing traffic, I definitely miss people. I do miss the in-person interaction. And I think it's the feast or famine thing, right? And so when you go from coming into the office almost every day to essentially going cold turkey and working remotely, that isolation can feel real. And I've actually made it an intention of mine to proactively go out every single day and interact with other humans.
How do you do that?
Well, I go to the gym. I make friends at the gym. I have my gym
you're like
friends.
A gym talker. You're standing there at the elliptical just chatting away.
No. These are classes. I can't talk in these classes. There's just no way.
So then how do you make friends?
Well, no, I mean, after class, I've got a friend who I go for walks with during the lunch break. I make it a point, and I'll go to the post office. I mean, the thing is, I love talking to strangers too. So if you see me, guys, watch out. I'm probably going to talk to you.
Well, I think one of the things that these labor economists were writing about that I just found fascinating was this idea that remote work can explain a third of the deterioration in mental health between 2011 and 2024.
Yeah, that's a staggering figure.
Just seems crazy to me. That's that's a lot. But on the days that I do get to work from home, which are never, how about never? I have enjoyed it, but I do feel disconnected from the news, from what's happening on the show. I mean, this show is obviously a very social thing.
Right.
We're at the library 3 days a week, no tickets or RSVP. And I feel like I can't be part of the show or part of the news or part of the office without actually being here.
Yeah. No,
but
I
understand that not everybody's job is like that. And one of the other things that you're a parent, I'm a parent.
Yeah.
The soul-sucking traffic really is the thing that gets me.
I mean, that really does, that eats into precious time you could have with your family.
Right.
If you're not sitting in an hour and a half of traffic or even like close to 3 hours round trip, that really, first of all, that's just a level of stress that is completely out of the equation. And then you can start dinner earlier. You can interact with your kids. I mean, my kids have gotten so used to my always being home when they get home from school that whenever I do tell them I'm not going to be here tomorrow, they're like, my little one's always like, are you going to be here when I get home? And I'm like, I think so. Yeah. So
I know. I try to at least say goodbye to my son in the morning. So sometimes that it requires me waking him up at an ungodly hour. And then, he has a swim lesson today at 6:30 and I'm not sure if I'll make it.
Right.
So it's like, that's my day. But should we take some calls here?
Yeah.
We've got Jane calling in Concord. Jane, you're first on BPR on 89.7 and NEPM. Hey, Jane.
Jane.
Good morning.
Morning.
So my main thought is that anytime we have to commute unnecessarily, we're burning more fossil fuels if we're driving our own cars.
Mm-hmm.
And companies were using the idea of back to work full time as an excuse to eliminate people because they knew a lot of people would resign who'd moved away to do telecommuting and that sort of thing.
True, yeah.
So they really I don't believe they really care that much about who's in the office. There are obviously a lot of jobs that you don't have to be in the office. But if you have one of those jobs, why shouldn't you be able to work from home and save the planet? There are countries all around the world right now who've been trying to economize on oil since Trump created the disaster in Iran of fossil fuel prices going up. So
you haven't heard, Jane. It's over now.
That's
it's
my
all
main
over.
thought.
Everything's over.
Save the planet. Don't commute.
Save the planet. Don't commute. It says Jane in Concord. An excellent point. Not to mention when gas is, $4 a gallon, and that hurts.
Yeah. And again, as you were saying earlier about the time, although I am still struck by some of the stats in this New York Times piece, the number one place for adults to form friendships, thank you, Jane, for the call, outranking is the office, outranking houses of worship, school, neighborhoods, and even sports teams.
And well, you know what? Because it is sort of, you're at work a lot, right? If you're working essentially like at least 8 hours a day, and if you're at this location that often, that's a good chunk of your day. And I have made lifelong friends from my workplaces, so I totally get that. And having that connection is critical. And I got to say, when I was working for the Washington Post, my lifeline was on Slack. I would be slacking. I was very, very active in the Slack threads, and it's not a replacement. But
I was going to say that.
When we were all laid off, I really missed my lifeline. I was like, because that was my primary mode of communicating with my fun colleagues.
So did you switch it to a group chat or something?
Yeah, we switched to a Signal chat, and every now and then I treat it like Slack. It's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah. See, I find Slack just totally crushing.
Oh, interesting.
Overwhelmed by all of the messages and things and stuff that I'm supposed to be doing, but maybe that's
I think
my
we
own
travel
issue.
in different Slack circles then.
Yeah, Slack isn't a fun place for me. It's things I have to do. Let's go to David, who's calling from Brighton. David, you're next on BPR. And if anyone else wants to join the conversation, the number is 877-301-8970. Call or text. Hey, David.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I wanted to talk about the mental health angle. I know a lot of people suffer from feeling of being isolated. An alternative to that, my experience, I'm an introvert. I've been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. So I actually really thrive when I'm allowed to work from home. I get so much energy back. I do like the interactions I have with people, but I just don't have to have as many. There's so many fewer distractions.
Yeah.
And I feel like as an accommodation for people who really do benefit from it, it would be nice if that were more openly acknowledged. I feel like for return to office, a lot of people like to treat it as a one-size-fits-all solution, but there's definitely people, and I count myself, that it does help. And I just wanted to speak up to that. So thank you for letting me.
Yeah, David,
Thanks,
and
really
I mean,
good point.
does your office allow some kind of hybrid, or I don't know what you do for work, but is there some kind of hybrid situation that maybe you could scratch both things? You could get your time home as an introvert to recharge, but also a little bit of the socialization?
Exactly right. I work for a hybrid situation right now. It's actually really good because the days I go in are not mandated, which gives me even more flexibility. So on a day when I'm just either hyper distracted or overwhelmed, I can get my work done from home. If I'm feeling great, I go on in. I'm on my way in right now.
I love that. I mean, I love that you have the choice there. I mean, that in and of itself is the advantage of having a hybrid. Like you can choose which days you're going to go in depending on how you feel. I mean, that is actually quite a luxury, and I'm happy for you.
I like that flexibility, although if everyone chooses a different day, there's also nothing, to me anyway, sadder than going up to an office space like maybe our newsroom on a day where it's not the required day that everyone be in and it's totally empty.
Right. And then you're like, hey, where is everyone?
Well, I came in and this is sad. So, but no, David brings up some good points there. Thank you, David. We've got Carrie texting from Hyannis. She says, I think, I was remote for 7 years pre-pandemic. I took a job in an office in 2023. And the only thing I miss about working at home is the ease of getting ready for the day. I miss my sweatpants and my extra hour of sleep. Oh, what is sleep like, Carrie? It's changed my weekend behavior, though. Now that I socialize all week at the office, I want to just decompress all weekend.
That's a really interesting point. You know, I have to say, whenever I did have to travel for work and I would be, meeting with my colleagues and in the office all day, like in the newsroom all day, and then I'd be done at the end of the day. And I was like, oh yeah, right. Your energy is it is being redirected. You sort of have to reallocate your resources when you're in office. You know this, Jamie.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things I on the flip side, I can't believe I'm defending my commute, but it's like a mental break period where I can transition, maybe like a third space, but I'm alone.
Yeah.
I could transition from work mode to home mode. Whereas if you're working from home, it's just you close the laptop and
right.
You're still in the same space, and suddenly work is home and home is work, and it's all mixed together.
The transition for me is putting on real pants. That's the transition for me. I put on real pants.
Put pants on to begin with.
But I gotta say, I mean, that drive into work is also just like valuable alone time. Or I remember when I would drive here to GBH, I would use that time to have one-on-one conversations with my husband because I knew we wouldn't be interrupted by our children. And so I'd get in the car and then call him we need to address our action items. So there is some benefit to being stuck in a commute. Yeah,
although I'm usually just fielding texts and calls from Jim my entire commute home. So it's a different kind of drive. Let's take another call. Who we got? Sarah in Mattapoisett.
Hi, Sarah.
Hey guys, how are you this morning?
We're doing well. How are you, Sarah?
I'm doing well. So I'm calling to vouch for in-office work. I'll give you a little story. I used to work remotely for about 9 months a couple of years ago. And I'm an adult with ADHD, and I found that setting was absolutely awful for me. Getting up and getting out of the house and having to go somewhere really is the key to success for me. And I totally agree with Jamie. I take that time that I'm commuting to, give a call to my grandma who I haven't talked to, make sure I check up with her, check up with my dad, put on a good podcast or an audiobook. It's given me some opportunities to listen to some things that I probably wouldn't enjoy otherwise. So I'm a firm believer in in-office work, but it's not for everybody. But I know it's certainly for me.
Thanks for that call, because I think that, you're sort of the inverse of David, who we heard, who's the introvert, and
right.
He wants to be, his personality requires more alone time so he can focus, whereas it sounds like you thrive on the routine of getting into the car every morning and just hustling out the door and getting into the office.
Absolutely, hustling it, and I'm definitely an extrovert. I love chatting with people. It in many ways it recharges my battery, but I could totally understand how for somebody who is very different from me that sounds like a nightmare, having to chitty chat with people all day long. But that's what I do for work. So being with people and getting out of the house, that's important for me. And I think you just got to find what works for you and stick with that. I hate that there's a lot of conversation around taking that away from people. people who have found that quite productive for themselves.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, not to get you in trouble, and you don't have to share if you don't want to, but one of my favorite things when Marjorie comes in the morning, especially after a long weekend or something, she'll go, what's the latest? What do we know? What's going on? Do you get any good gossip there at the office, Sarah?
Goss.
You know, sometimes I work with children, so there is always something quite interesting going on, especially towards the end of the school year. They're all getting a little stir crazy. It's the last week of school, so there have definitely been some interesting stories swapped back and forth. And I love that. It's a great chuckle, and I think it's a great way to connect with your coworkers, you know, and collaborate and laugh about the things that you guys are both dealing with. You know, it kind of relieves some of the maybe workplace stress that exists in everyone's workplace.
Well, that's great.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you, Sarah.
happy for you, Sarah. Enjoy, and hey, happy summer vacation.
Yeah, if you get one.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Take it easy.
Thanks for calling. Yeah, I mean, on the flip side, not to argue against Sarah, but then another one of these pieces in the New York Times by Claire Miller talks about how remote work has helped an entire generation of parents. I guess it's sort of related to what Sarah was saying, but this idea that talking about in the office, talking about the things that you face as a parent more openly has become accepted now because of remote work and what we all went through in the pandemic and whatnot. I mean, do you sense that?
I do agree with that. I think that before the pandemic, you know, work and home life were pretty siloed from each other, and once we were all sort of hunkered down at home, we couldn't hide the fact that we are, you know, multifaceted humans with, you know, lives outside of the workplace. Not that we were hiding it, but, you know, the fact that like my kids were often in my calls, my Zoom meetings in the morning. I mean, that's how it was, because we had no choice. You know, they were there, they were present. And I think being able to have that conversation about sort of the demands of your life outside of work, it just sort of even the playing field for everyone, I would like to think, because it's like, hey, you know, like you're human, I'm human. We have demands, people who rely on us. Like, let's be reasonable about
as long as the work gets
expectations
done
at work.
and-
Yes, as long as the work gets done. Yes, exactly. I mean, that should be what it is, as long as the work gets done.
Well, actually, speaking of responsibilities outside of the office, we have Todd calling from Attleboro. Todd, you're next on BPR. And if anyone else wants to join, by the way, the number's 877-301-8970. Call or text. Hey, Todd.
Hey, Todd.
Hey, thanks. Normally I call from Attleboro, but I'm in Southwest Florida working remotely.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
So and I feel fortunate. I mean, this happened. I work at a university, and COVID, you know, I've been pretty much working from home since then. I feel it's been beneficial for me. I feel a lot healthier. I actually get to the gym. I've got my gym friends, like I heard.
Mm-hmm.
Very important.
It is important.
And I'm here taking care of my mother post-surgery, so it's a big boon to be able to do that and, you know, and keep on top of my job.
Yeah.
And if I were to go back to campus and the commute, I think it would be really difficult. I feel like I'd lose exercise time. I see what my husband goes through. He has to commute in every day. And the MBTA can be just a killer sometimes with delayed trains to get back home on the Providence line, and we won't drive in. That would add to our stress. But for me personally, it's been an overall boon. And I recognize I've got, you know, a good employer that still supports it.
Right.
So I'm thankful to have that. I mean, there's been a lot of benefits. I mean, you know, I know my neighbors better. I've become a therapy support human for my dog, which is interesting.
That's sweet.
But yeah, it's been good. But I can understand the arguments for being around in an office again. But I could never go back to that.
Todd, 2 questions for you. First of all, how's your mother doing?
Oh, thanks. Much better. We got, you know, nursing care. They're taking her out, so I can actually think about going home to work from home in Attleboro.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. And number 2 is part of the reason you're loving this remote work thing so much is because your husband's back up in Attleboro and you're down in Florida? Or am I just projecting?
I mean, yeah, that was okay for the first couple of weeks, but
now
I
you
want to be
miss him.
home now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Understood.
Yeah,
thanks for calling, Todd.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, I gotta say, so, you know, okay, a third of companies across the U.S. have made RTO mandates. So that's, you know, return to office mandates. And there was an interesting piece in the New York Times, and it was like the secret reason bosses want everyone back in the office every day of the week. And the study says that it's essentially because they really like hearing the sounds of their voices and they want to.
Oh, you mean because the managers like
managers,
having an audience?
They love having an audience.
That's why I make all the producers come in every day.
That's right. They're like, Jamie's like, everyone come in, listen.
You got to come in and
me.
listen to my little stories in our morning meetings.
To me.
Poor kids.
But I mean, that's. I don't think that's a compelling argument to make. Though I am curious to see if people think like, is working remotely? Do you consider it a privilege or a necessity or both? You know, I mean. That to me is sort of the question. I think a lot of, it's still viewed as a privilege.
Yeah.
And you can give us a call and let us know or text us at 877-301-8970.
We have an anonymous texter who says, describing a commute as a third space is so American. I know. That's really cruel. It's true, but
oh, no.
Listen, when you have,
so true.
I mean, you've got kids and I got a 6-year-old and he's great, but there's not a lot of alone time, and so I'm alone in the car.
Yeah. I mean, that's also when I get to listen to music with explicit language, with reckless abandon. Oh. Yeah, it's therapeutic.
You don't have to listen to Blippi or whatever.
Or I don't have to, censor what I'm listening to. We have Lori on the phone from Boston. Hi, Lori.
Hey, Lori.
Hi.
Thanks for calling.
In answer to your question, is it a privilege or a necessity? It's absolutely a necessity. When we went home to be safer, not locked down, when we went home to be safer, we turned on a dime to keep our companies running for our businesses and the bosses. But there were bosses from minute one who were like, yeah, in a few weeks we'll be right back to work. Like we ever stopped working.
Excellent point.
It became a necessity because more of us recognized what we need to be successful in our whole lives, not just our work lives. We kept businesses running. We grew some businesses. Some businesses had terrible leaders and didn't quite know how to manage remote people, but, they were self-selecting and self-announcing. It's an absolute necessity to find that balance and talk to your people and your teams and your clients and find the balance. But the mandates of return to work, dudes, and it's mostly dudes, but there are ladies. We've been working. We've been working on your behalf. We turned on a dime and we made it happen. So
Lori, we only have a couple seconds left, but what do you do for work?
I work in marketing.
Marketing.
Okay.
So, I mean, I do think, thank you for the call, Lori. I mean, I do think there are a lot of jobs that, service employees, nurses, all kinds of professions where, unfortunately, you can't do any of that remotely, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
I don't know. Did we solve anything here, Christina?
I think so. Well, Chuck in Brighton sent a text. He said he has a significant commute for work at multiple locations, and he loves it because he gets to listen to us. But we're out of time. Thank you for all the calls and texts coming
nice,
up.
Chuck.
I know. Thanks, Chuck. Coming up after this quick break, naturalist Cy Montgomery zooms in to discuss new legislation aimed to protect some of our oldest ocean neighbors, the horseshoe crab. I'm Christina Quinn. He is Jamie Bologna. We're in for Jim and Marjorie. You're listening to BPR on GBH and NEPM and at youtube.com/GBH News.
The World Cup is spilling into Massachusetts streets. The world's game in our community. GBH News is capturing the energy, the culture, and the news behind every game.
I could tell you where I was in every World Cup since 1986.
They are amazing. Boston is my #1 place now.
You have bragging rights for 4 years. 4 friggin' years.
Follow along at gbhnews.org/World Cup.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, committed to simplifying college planning for families over 45 years with trusted guidance, interactive tools, step-by-step videos, and more. MEFA.org. And the Museum of Fine Arts, presenting Framing Nature, Gardens, and Imagination. This new exhibition of beloved and never-before-seen treasures centers gardens across time, place, and cultures. More at MFA.org.
Welcome back to BPR on GBH and NEPM, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I'm BPR executive producer Jamie Bologna. I'm here with Fighting Crime podcast host Christina Quinn, which, by the way, I listened to your Little Scandinavia episode this weekend. It was great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes.
Sounding good.
I went to lock up for you.
Yes, yes, you did. And now you're here locked up with me. We're filling in for Jim and Marjorie, but don't worry, they'll be back at the BPL tomorrow with Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell for the June edition of Ask the AG, and they'll also be at the BPL Wednesday and Friday. We're joined now on Zoom by naturalist and author Cy Montgomery. Her latest book is The True and Lucky Life of a Turtle, which was just named one of the best books of the year by the Center for Children's Books. Congratulations, Cy.
Congratulations.
And welcome.
Hi, Cy.
I am so glad to be back.
Congratulations on this new win. We're going to talk about turtles, your turtle, and your win. We'll get back to that in a little bit. But first, I have a question for you about some proposed legislation that's out there to ban the use of horseshoe crab blood, which has been used to test the sterility of everything in medicine. But perhaps you probably could do a better job of explaining why horseshoe crabs are so important, but also why are we still using their blood when it seems like there are ways that we can test it without them.
Yeah, there is totally an excellent substitute which will work for almost all tests. Horseshoe crab blood is really different from ours. First, it's blue, but it reacts with pathogens. So it's used to test, like you said, the safety of different drugs and vaccines and procedures. And most of us have benefited from many, many years of using this to guarantee the safety of these drugs and devices. But there is an alternative which has been embraced by all of the medical groups. It's just people don't like to change. And these animals, they've been on Earth since before the dinosaurs. These guys, they're really fascinating, and they're disappearing from even your local beaches.
Yeah.
They used to be all over beaches in Ipswich and Shipyard Beach in Duxbury, and now you just never even see them anymore.
No.
And it's because they are this sounds like a nightmare abduction by aliens. Imagine you're a horseshoe crab. You've been on Earth doing your thing for hundreds of millions of years, and all of a sudden people swoop in, pick you up, take you to a laboratory, take out the human equivalent of a gallon of your blood. Then they probably use you for bait. They return some of them in their weakened condition to the ocean, where, as you can imagine, they mostly die. And there's a substitute available. So this good bill, it's HB 5226, would ban this unnecessary, cruel, destructive practice. It's not just bad for horseshoe crabs. Horseshoe crabs' eggs, for example, are essential for many migratory birds, some of whom are endangered. They're an essential part of our world for hundreds of millions of years.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's worth noting that the discovery of horseshoe crab blood to test the sterility of drugs was actually discovered here on Cape Cod in Woods Hole, at the Woods Hole, was a biological observatory there. But and what we've seen here in Massachusetts is that there's a staggering loss of horseshoe crab population, specifically in Massachusetts, because of this long history of harvesting their blood. And I feel very strongly about horseshoe crabs because I did a story on this years ago, and I haven't stopped thinking about them ever since. But I remember going to an estuary in Duxbury, and was really struck by the fact that there are so many more males than females, and that is a problem because you cannot reproduce when the ratio is that disparate.
Yeah, what is that about, Cy? Why are there so many more males than females?
Well, I don't know. I wondered that about MIT years ago.
Wah, wah.
Sorry.
No, so I have two questions about this bill, which, as you said, is H5266. So I guess call your legislators if you're into that. Not that they'll do anything. They've got their 5-month vacation coming up. Not to be Jim Browdy about it, but it's been referred to committee, so we'll see what that means. But Sai, you said earlier that this is about people not wanting to change. I don't know anything about what it takes to make this type of stuff used in the testing materials, but I'd imagine it's easier to make it than it is to go out into the ocean, catch horseshoe crabs, and suck their blood. Or am I wrong about that?
I totally agree. But there's four companies in the U.S. that do this, and two of them are in Massachusetts. And they're all set up to do this.
Right.
You know, they have all the infrastructure to do it. I mean, it's just hard to do things, to switch over. And if you've been doing it one way and making plenty of money, that's what most folks would rather do. But several other states have completely banned this. And a lot of the big medical companies, including like Bayer, they're switching right over to the new synthetic way of doing it.
So is Eli Lilly.
I know. It's not exactly a small company.
Right.
So if you care about this and want the legislature to do something about it, 617-722-2000 is the phone number. And again, get them before they go off on their 5-month vacation. Sai, there was a story, we're talking with naturalist and author Sai Montgomery on BPR, GBH, and NEPM. Sai, there was a story in the Boston Globe that I just loved about why people in Massachusetts keep thinking they're seeing mountain lions. Why?
I love this story.
Well, they might be seeing mountain lions. And I know this because the day before my husband and I got married in Harrisville, New Hampshire, my husband saw a mountain lion.
In New Hampshire?
Yes. And they aren't supposed to be here. In fact, they weren't supposed to be here until somebody actually found one who was hit on a highway in Connecticut. Yeah. And there was the corpse, and there he was. So, I mean, whether they are a breeding population, I don't know if there's a breeding population of these guys. And I also know that it is very easy to see an animal that looks way bigger to you than it really is. However, mountain lions are distinctive for a number of reasons, and not just size. Their tail, the mountain lion's tail is as thick as a child's arm. A bobcat or a lynx does not have a long tail. And sometimes people will see in the distance a great big tomcat hidden partially by, and they'll see a big tail, and we make things bigger than they really are.
In the wild. Like, think about when like a bat flies into your house and suddenly it's like, oh my goodness. Or like if a bird flies inside.
I'm so happy when a bat comes.
Of course you are.
Of course you are. Of course you are. But I think it is worth noting the distinction. So bobcats are the only wildcat known to live in Massachusetts. And mountain lions, they are typically found in the West. But there are many residents in Massachusetts who claim they have seen mountain lions. And it has sort of almost become... there's like sort of treading into conspiracy.
The Bigfoot situation.
Bigfoot conspiracy theory territory, because it's like, no, I mean, mountain lions are not native to Massachusetts. You're totally seeing a bobcat. Or
a house cat.
Or a house cat.
Yes. A house cat.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, that's a big house cat.
An overfed house cat.
I mean, I'm only 5'6", but my goodness.
I know people who thought they saw an injured bald eagle and called up and said, yeah, it's white. It's got this like yellow bill, and the rehabber is like, yeah, and tell me about the feet, and like, yeah, it's got the webbed feet. Well,
so what was it, a duck?
Was it a seagull?
No, it was a herring gull.
Oh, it was a herring gull.
We want to see exotic animals, but here's the thing: animals are really on the move right now because of climate change, because we have wrecked their habitat, and they've got to. There's so few places for wild animals to safely live that they are moving around, and I am not surprised at all. We're also, I think any minute now we're going to get wolves, which I welcome them back. We used to have wolves. We used to have all these predators. Now we complain, oh, there's so many deer, and we're getting Lyme disease from their ticks and stuff. Well, guess why this is? It's all because of us.
Yeah.
It's all because of us. We wrecked the climate. We killed all the predators, and then we're like whining about.
And now we're complaining about it.
Yeah. So far we've killed all the horseshoe crabs. We've killed
I know, it's
all the
so
predators. No,
All
this
the
isn't you. This
wolves.
is us.
Yeah,
We're the monsters.
No. I mean, it's true. It's fair to mention, though, back in March of 2011, a mountain lion did make its way into Massachusetts after it was killed and struck by an SUV in Connecticut. So it somehow made it across state lines. And then, but then they did a lab test on it, and it found out it was from South Dakota. So that's a long trek to
And
make.
it did not hitchhike. It walked. That animal walked. So, they're coming our way. Animals are on the move. And to me, one of the good things about this is when we have a return of predators, it seems to me like the earth is trying to become whole again. That it's just give nature the tiniest bit of an opening. It tries to restore the balance.
Yeah.
And so I say, come on out, mountain lions. Most of the time, mountain lions are big, scary predators.
Yeah.
But there's many places, including, my friend Vicki Croak is working on a book right now, a place where lions, not mountain lions, these are Asiatic lions, live in harmony with people in India. It's the only Asiatic lions in the world. And the people live in harmony with them. My best friend, Liz Thomas, lived in with what we then called the Bushmen, now called the San, in Namibia, where again the humans and the lions, these were African lions, worked out an agreement. And the lions never killed the people, and the people never killed the lions. In fact, one time she woke up after sleeping in the open and saw around her the pug marks, the footprints of lions who had walked around her prone sleeping body and stared into her sleeping face.
And didn't eat it.
And just walked away.
Totally not.
That's amazing. I mean, that is amazing. So you're saying, Cy Montgomery, naturalist, lover of animals, is saying, welcome home, wolves. Come on back. You're ready. I'm not sure if I am, but I would like to also talk to you about a new discovery having to do with a pigeon's liver.
Oh man, this is so bizarre.
This story blows my mind, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since I read about it. Scientists have discovered a surprising navigation mechanism. So you know how pigeons, homing pigeons, they can always figure out where they're going.
The Curiosity Desk a couple days ago had a pigeon expert on the show. I think they had pigeons in here.
Oh my goodness!
Don't tell building management.
Okay, well, that's funny. I brought a chicken in once, and I got in trouble.
We had an alpaca in here once too.
Chicken.
I did. I brought a
my
rooster in.
lady. Man, this is great.
But yeah, it turns out that scientists discovered that the iron levels in the liver of pigeons serves as a magnet with the planet. Maybe you can do a better job.
Yeah, wait, so it's like a compass?
Yeah, it's like an electromagnetic thing.
They aren't absolutely sure. People have wondered, as you pointed out, for a long time, how is it that homing pigeons can home? Right. How do they complete these amazing trips? And they've done all kinds of things to poor experimental pigeons. They've made them fly blindfolded. They stuff things in their nose. They're trying to figure out what senses do they use. They probably use a bunch of different senses, but now it appears that their liver could be essentially a sensory organ. Now, the part that I have trouble with is, I totally understand that your liver is full of iron. We know this,
right?
Because
among other things,
that's what it does.
So, which I'm not going to do, but anyway, we know your liver is full of iron. They use this drug that would deactivate the macrophages that are controlling the accumulation of iron in the liver.
Right.
Gave it to pigeons and tried to get them to navigate, and that messed them up.
It did. I know. That's so cool.
Once again, oh, no kidding. I know, it's really crazy. Why can't we navigate with our livers?
I
so
know.
I was
going
to ask you, what else can I do with my livers?
Well, I can navigate up to the bar. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
keep wondering what I'm going to do with my liver too. But I think we are so visually oriented that we just don't even give our livers a chance.
That's true. It's a fascinating thing, though. I'm like, wait a minute. How much of my liver or human livers can play a role in navigating our way through the planet? I mean, imagine if you didn't need a GPS system. You just use your liver, your own internal.
Well, Well,
Yeah.
this is part of this whole, I mean, right now, this is a really
wouldn't trust my
exciting
liver.
time to be alive because we're discovering the ways that other animals apprehend our world using senses that we have lost, don't listen to, or have
Oh.
never. And we're finding that, animals are capable of these amazing feats
Yeah.
that used to be completely overlooked, or we just thought it was someone's imagination that this was happening. And every day there's some new discovery about the abilities that the animals around us have.
That's really cool.
Well,
That's why
Si,
your
we-
job never gets
We
old.
only have a couple seconds left. I do want to squeeze one other thing in here because we did mention at the top about your book.
Yes.
And it's an award-winning book now, and it is the favorite book of my son at home, and we've been exchanging emails back and forth and pictures of turtles in our yard. And so last night, my son Anthony recorded a little message for you because he had a question about one of the turtles featured in your award-winning book, Fire Chief. Can we play that?
Hi, Sally. How does it feel like to have a pet turtle like in your backyard, like Fire Chief?
So I think he's just very jealous that you have Fire Chief in your backyard. But
Well,
just
you
in
know
a couple
what?
seconds, what's it like
You
to have
have
Fire
to
Chief?
come and visit and meet Fire Chief.
Oh, yes. Yes. That's the right
That's
answer.
perfect. All right, we'll be up there soon, Si.
We've been speaking with naturalist Cy Montgomery. Coming up after this quick break, Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett is here. I'm Christina Quinn with Jamie Bologna. We're in for Jim and Marjorie. You're listening to BPR on GBH and NEPM and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
On Boston Common, the Embrace Monument has given the city a new landmark for love, labor, and a longing for freedom. Now, Embrace Boston is moving that conversation indoors, with plans for a Frederick Douglass Civic Center in downtown Crossing, a home for exhibitions, gathering, and education. President and CEO Amari Paris Jeffries joins us to talk about the building, the timing, and what Boston chooses to remember and embrace next. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, providing coverage plans for individuals, families, employers, and retirees with benefits that help you live in your moment. More at massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org.
And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings featuring Pete Buttigieg, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, financial journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin, and former NASA head Charles Bolden. bostonspeakers.org.
Welcome back to BPR on GBH and NEPM, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I'm BPR executive producer Jamie Bologna, here with Fighting Crime podcast host Christina Quinn. We're filling in for Jim and Marjorie. Don't worry, they'll be back tomorrow at the BPL with the Attorney General for Ask the AG, as well as the state party chairs, and then two of the women behind It's Raining Men are also going to join us on the show.
Wow,
tomorrow, so it's gonna be
that's a
fun.
full house. That sounds very exciting.
Jim's very excited about that. Right now, we're joined in Studio 3 by Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett, Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at Boston Medical School, and Communications Fellow at Primary Care Collaborative. Hello, Dr. KGB.
Hello. So good to see you both.
Good to see you too.
So there's a Senate bill
Yes.
that is slated for a vote this week on Thursday that will supposedly overhaul Massachusetts' primary care physician problem. We've got a big problem. I mean, I know I can speak from experience, just having to find a primary care physician has always been an issue. We've had a shortage of primary care physicians for a long time, but can you explain what this bill is hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, so this is a bill that actually was voted and passed on last Thursday, June 18th, which was my birthday, and I said to Senator
Senate,
Friedman,
right?
amazing birthday present. There's a group of us that have been working on this legislation for 8 years. And it is called S3116. And like I mentioned, Senator Friedman really chaired the legislation. And it is great news for our state that it passed. So I'm going to talk about some of the benefits of it, some of what we don't yet see in it, and then some of what we can imagine may be challenges down the road. So
wait, can I just ask a question?
Yes.
So it passed the Senate, but it didn't pass the House.
Correct.
So
Passed
the
the
House is where
Senate.
everything goes to die.
Right. Okay. Yes. So let's just take a pause before we
Okay,
get
it's
all
hard to be Nelly
before we
negative
get
over here.
negative, because this is the House has actually said in some closed room that they also imagine that they will be looking at primary care legislation to pass before July 31st. So
before
I
the
want
5-month
our
vacation.
listeners to really know, first of all, how exciting this is, and second of all, that we should really be making sure that we are calling our representatives, our local representatives that are in the House to speak to the Speaker about the importance of primary care legislation for Massachusetts. So
617-722-2000.
there you go.
Yeah,
there
call 'em
you
up.
go. I love it. So essentially, the Senate bill that just went through looks to increase investment in primary care. We are currently to 6.7% of what we spend on healthcare goes towards primary care, which is paltry given the fact that we take care of 50% of the issues in healthcare.
That is paltry.
Yes. Second, and wanting to go up actually to 15% by 2030 in terms of the investment. So that's big.
So it's like a graduate, like 9%.
It's graduate,
12%.
but really importantly, it's talking about not increasing the overall cost spend. So I know a lot of people are very concerned about the healthcare costs of our state, and we are too. So it's saying actually systems need to be working creatively to find where there are dollars that they can put towards primary care. That is causing consternation, as you can imagine, because we don't yet have the idea around a common fund, which the House actually has put together a bill to say, where does this money come from,
Right.
and how do we create a common fund? So that's really important. But we also know there's a lot of money on the budget in healthcare spending in Massachusetts. We have some of the highest rates of spending, and very little of it goes to
Okay, so this maybe
primary
seems like
care.
a dumb question, but I'm
Yeah.
going to ask it anyway. Because
Please.
I don't know. How does spending more fix it?
Yeah. So it's not just about paying physicians more. It's actually investing in the system. So it's thinking about how do you get more community health workers? How do you have more behavioral health people? How do you have more medical students who are looking at primary care physicians and clinicians are saying, wow, that actually looks like an amazing field. I want to go into it. How do we have people staying in it? Because it is at this point, it is such a high burnout field. And so part of the investment is taking care of its people, and part of the investment is taking care of the team so we can deliver better care. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I want listeners to understand that this is a huge deal, that it passed the Senate. But again, we are very much hoping that the House will not only offer its own primary care legislation, but that will also kind of evaluate what's come out of the Senate.
So investing in essentially recruitment and retainment and
Yeah.
maybe even like just actual support to prevent burnout and
Correct.
because
And
that's what
then
happens.
really like looking at how do we move away from fee for service, which we know actually makes care more expensive and not necessarily better, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a symptom that I don't need to see you for, the only way I get paid right now is say, you have to come in for a visit. That's actually not good care, especially if people have 2 jobs and have to take 3 buses to come see you. Right. The third piece is it actually takes GME money, like we're recouping on some of the monies from Medicaid for more GME spots, for more trainees, and then thinking about reducing all the prior authorizations, all the kind of extra work that we talk about in primary care.
Right.
It's huge. It's a huge bill.
Well, again, we're talking with Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett from Boston Medical Center and Boston University Medical School. If you care about this issue, 617, what is the number? I already lost it. 617-722-2000 to call your legislator.
Thank you so much for putting that in.
I mean, I'm guessing also you've also found that people, a lot of primary care physicians maybe sometimes want to enter specialties or, it sounds like that's part of the
Absolutely.
problem.
Yeah, well, specialties, dermatology.
Dermatology.
Let's talk sunscreen.
Let's talk sunscreen.
This is
It's officially summer on
This is
BPR.
fun. It's so true.
What is the deal
what's
with
the news on
sunscreen?
Yeah,
the new sunscreen.
Okay.
I don't know.
So,
how do you pronounce that?
I had to look
bismuth?
it up.
What is it?
It's bimotrizanol.
Bimotrizanol.
You
fine in
emphasize
Europe
the
and
mo.
finally fine here.
Yeah. So for
that's my
decades,
MO.
it's been approved in Europe. In fact, I just after reading the literature that came out about it, I was like, why are we not all using this all the time? But the FDA, regulates sunscreen similar to over-the-counter medications, and so it had to go through a lot of rigorous trials and efficacy, which is great. We like having data always.
Wait, let's back
but
up.
the great
what
news.
is this? What does it do? Why is it
Okay,
good?
why is it good?
Yeah.
Right? I was just about to get into that.
Okay,
so,
sorry.
couple things. One is everybody knows ultraviolet rays are what's harmful, right? So there's two kinds. There's UVA and UVB. UVB is the kind that gives you a sunburn if you get a lot of it. UVA is the stuff that gives you aging, premature aging, wrinkles, etc. Sunspots both cause are the kinds that can cause skin cancer. So the current sunscreen we have on the market in the U.S. actually, first of all, it degrades more quickly. In other words, it falls apart on the skin more quickly. Second of all, it doesn't protect as much against UVA. So that means that we've been using sunscreen that does not protect against wrinkles and aging and some kinds of skin cancer, which is very disappointing for those of us who are, religiously applying. Third of all, we have the stuff that's actually really good is the zinc oxide, which everybody looks terrible in.
That's
right?
the one
It's
that just totally covers
It's like
your...
paste.
Yes.
It looks like you just walked into like a toothbrush or something. It's like so bad, right? And so and there's this stuff that's come out on TikTok and people are being haters against sunscreen, but. And luckily, that's not true for a lot of, things that are being posted. But I think there is a real sense of people not wanting to use sunscreen in this country. And, part of it is just wanting to throw off any kinds of public health advice. But second of all, there is some very small evidence that the sunscreen we use now can be absorbed in the bloodstream, and the stuff that is just approved by the FDA will not be absorbed in the same way.
Because the molecules are
correct.
Bigger, fatter,
The molecules are bigger, and they're less resistant to being broken down.
I don't know if the
That's
FDA
impressive science. You know some science.
I
Jamie.
know that was
I
impressive.
read one article.
I didn't hear
I'm
enzyme,
I'm curious,
anything like that, but it was
has
cool.
anyone at the FDA looked at whether you cover your body with the algae from the reflecting pool, if that protects you from the sun rays?
That's the next study. It's a randomized control
Because I know a guy
trial.
who has a lot of blue paint.
Yes.
cover
That
your
is
whole body
such a
in
good
blue
scientific question, Jamie.
Yeah, if you could look
Yeah,
into that.
we'll pose it.
So when will we start seeing sunscreen with bimotrizanol?
We actually have
you
we have a
nailed
thought
it.
of some people saying it.
Yeah.
Let's hear some tape of TikTokers' best guess on how to pronounce this new
this is so
sunscreen,
exciting.
bimethoprisonol or
Yeah.
whatever.
It's called bemetrizanol, or BEMT for short.
This new sunscreen filter called bemetrizanol.
Bemetrizanol. The new UV filter bemetrizanol.
Bemetrizanol.
Bimotrizanol?
Bimotrizanol.
I believe the doctor.
Yeah,
No
I
idea
think
how
it's
to pronounce
B.
it, so here's our best guess. Bimotrizanol.
Bimotrizanol.
Yeah,
Okay.
that last
That's the
person
one?
did a good job.
I think it's what's a good way to
Mo
remember it?
is you have to do it. What?
BMO tries it out by putting on
Ooh.
BMO-trizanol.
All right.
There you
I
go.
wish I'd been in
You
med
should be in
school with you.
marketing. Okay.
Yes.
We're talking with Katherine Gergen Barnett from Boston Medical Center. Where do you want to go next, Christina?
Well, I think we should talk about there is a new collection of research out that supposedly unveils 7 unexpected takeaways about the effects of cannabis.
I hated this article.
And I read through it, and I wasn't quite sure what the surprising takeaways were.
It was actually quite a confusing article, I'm not going to lie, because I actually read through the comments after the article because I was similarly like, where are the 7 takeaways?
Right. You're like, did I
that
miss
being
something?
said, there is really good research that's coming out around cannabis. And why is this important? I think it's important for a number of reasons. One is that we obviously know that people can get cannabis, and yet we don't have regulations around how much should people use, how strong is it. We know that, if you're taking it like as an edible. It may be a different strength than other ways. So it really looked at different parts of the life cycle and the ways in which THC or that sort of psychoactive component of cannabis affects different brains. Some of it wasn't surprising. So developing brains, younger people, especially 13 to sort of mid 30s, have higher rates of high rates of psychosis with high amounts of cannabis use, in part because that THC can really create dopamine in ways that their brains can't handle. The second piece of which is that heavy users have a hard time executing on tasks. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. Not at all. The third piece, which is, I don't know, maybe more reassuring, is that people who are older, sort of middle age and up, have better kind of regulations around how they use it, and it's not as impactful on their brain function. But
what do you mean they have grown into using it in a better way?
I think part of it is where are you deciding to use cannabis and when, right? So having part of what the argument of the article is that we need to have some regulation around when we use it in our days and in our lives. Middle-aged people may have that, but they also have brains that are already more kind of structurally sound than younger people. Right. So it doesn't affect their brain as much. Right. The piece that I found really interesting is looking at it for potential kind of helping what we call mitochondria, so the strong parts of your cell, not fall apart, which happens with Alzheimer's. So that was kind of interesting research. It's very, very initial. But the takeaway that I got from this article is really think about, if you are using cannabis, when you do it in a way that doesn't impact your life, doing it later in life, obviously as a parent, you think about, regulations for young people. Yeah. And that seems pretty wise.
So you're saying save it for retirement.
Save it for retirement, and so you don't get Alzheimer's.
Well, can we go back to skin for a minute here?
Yes.
Just
please.
I'm turning 40 in a little bit, and I'm freaking out.
You don't look a day over 20.
Thank you. It costs a lot of money.
Yes,
to look this great.
All that UVA.
Oh yeah, all the
protection.
Bemo-trizinol.
But there was a piece we were reading about an acne vaccine.
Oh yeah, wasn't
Can you explain
that interesting?
First of all, it's mRNA.
mRNA.
Yeah,
it's an mRNA vaccine, which I think is yet again an amazing example of where we can go with mRNA vaccines, right? So these are vaccines that can be much more tailored towards certain reactions in your body. So what this does is it targets, so first of all, the listeners, I think it's really important to know that acne is not an infection, it's inflammation. So we all have bacteria on our skin. Some people's bodies react to that bacteria, and that's what causes acne. So these vaccines actually target the body to fight the bacteria and all of the stuff that comes with the bacteria that causes inflammation. So it's a trial of, I think, 800 participants looking at moderate to severe acne and whether 3 of this vaccine can actually get you to mild acne, which, one of the things they said is maybe with such great results, people can start trusting vaccines more, which I thought was an interesting kind of takeaway for it. But I will also say we spend a lot of money on acne care in our country, and it also causes a lot of suffering, and it's huge mental health impact for those who have it.
Could you answer sort of why some people have
quickly?
Yeah, quickly. Why are some more inflamed than others? Is it just how the body responses?
I mean, we've talked a lot about inflammation on the show, and some people have higher inflammatory responses for a number of reasons.
Can I ask you one
Great
last question before we go?
Please.
Does the algae treat acne?
Oh my God, Jamie.
Actually, salt water, I just learned from one of my teens, is very good for acne.
Right.
So,
there you go.
salty algae water is perfect. Exactly.
Speaking with Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett, Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center. And she's also the Associate Professor at BU Medical School. She's a big deal. We say goodbye to you listening on NEPM. But make sure to tune in to The Fabulous 413 starting at 3 o'clock this afternoon. The show continues here in Boston. Coming up after this quick break, food policy analyst Corby Kummer. I'm Christina Quinn. He is Jamie Bologna. We're in for Jim and Marjorie, and you're listening to BPR on GBH and NEPM, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
GBH Radio is where you come to find serious news and analysis of local, national, and international stories. It's not just nice to have, it's a have to have. Support this trusted home for fact-based journalism at gbhnews.org.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Rogers Fish Company, founded by Roger Berkowitz. Their signature double clam chowder is available for purchase at all Market Basket locations. More at rogersfishcompany.com. And New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill, a garden destination 50 miles from Boston. Visitors can discover summer with thousands of blooms, twilight experiences, art exhibitions, and educational programs for all ages. nebg.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Welcome back to Hour 2 of BPR on 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I'm Fighting Crime podcast host Christina Quinn, sitting here with BPR executive producer Jamie Bologna. Jim and Marjorie will be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with Attorney General Andrea Campbell for Ask the AG. No tickets or RSVP required. Hi again, Jamie.
Hello, Christina. We're not really, we're not sitting.
No, we're standing.
We're standing.
Yeah.
I mean, not that that matters.
Just so everyone knows.
just so that you know. 2 hours. Oh, wow. What a prize. We're joined now on Zoom by Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and a Senior Lecturer at Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Hey, Corby.
Hi, Corby.
Extremely excited to be with Jamie and Christina.
We're extremely excited to have you.
Likewise, sir. There's a bipartisan bill that senators have introduced to.
You're obsessed with bills.
I mean, I kind of am because
it's like the third bill.
I mean, it's all about policy at the end of the day. That's what keeps things going or stops things and ends things. And here we are. So senators have introduced a bipartisan bill to revive regional food programs. And I would like to know if you could sort of walk us through what the bill is about.
So under both the Obama and Biden administrations, there was an extremely active effort on the part of federal governments to allow smaller regional farmers to be able to sell to schools, to be able to sell to larger wholesalers, big supermarket chains. And the way they would do that would be to build regional food hubs. Those would be places where a smaller farmer could ship all of her or his stuff, over 50% of farmers are women, and get, by combining their potatoes and kale with somebody else's, they would get enough bulk to qualify for contracts with schools, with federally funded meals programs, and also for private industry. It was a great thing, these regional food hubs. And Tom Vilsack, who's been commissioner under several presidents, got a lot of money for this. And then right after the Trump administration, Trump 2 took hold, they canceled these, along with canceling a very disastrous over $1 billion that small farmers were getting to sell into schools.
Right.
But this is a way
Corby,
of
what was the
reviving.
thinking? Can you just explain that? Why? I mean, I know we don't need an explanation as to why
the rationale. Is there a rationale?
But is there a rationale?
The rationale was that it didn't align with priorities. We might be talking about SNAP, and I'm able to give you the rationale for cuts to SNAP, which is similarly disastrous, but it's hard to do this. What was most ironic was that RFK Jr. was saying school food is poison. We have to get local food back into schools. That means regional farmers. Well, the USDA was doing just that. And they cut $1 billion in this fantastic program, and many smaller farmers had bought new equipment and planted just on the basis of that expected money that was canceled. So that was, I would say that's the single worst thing for food and farmers that the administration has done, the second administration since it came in, and then SNAP is the terrible thing for hunger.
So it sounds like they're
I don't know the
backpedaling.
rationale for it.
There's some backpedaling here then.
Well, if there would be backpedaling if it passed. These regional food hubs were in place. They were working.
Right.
They were terrific. So the idea that some lawmakers are trying to get them back is great.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll just keep an eye on that and hope that
Are there chances? I mean, what are the chances, Corby?
Are you feeling
Say that again.
optimistic? Do you think that's going to pass?
I'm optimistic that it's back in the public discourse and that people are understanding it's really important to help farms, because if you don't help farms and farmers, you're not going to have more nutritious food, and you're not going to help more people who need nutritious food, especially in schools, to get it.
All right. Well, speaking of nutritious food,
Ultra processed foods, Corby. There was this piece that we were reading in CNN about once you pop, you just can't stop. The magic or addictive nature of ultra processed foods, and
they're addictive by design.
I mean, yeah, I feel like, is there anything new here that we didn't already know? What and why don't we care about ultra processed food addiction the way we did about cigarettes or other stuff?
But now we do. The idea that RFK Jr. has demonized ultra-processed food, says they should come out of school food without actually backing it with any kind of USDA legislation. Why would I put those two in the same sentence? It's a very interesting fact that no matter how much RFK Jr. talks about the evils of poisons of ultra-processed food and school food, he has no control over it. It's all Brooke Rollins, the Secretary of Agriculture at USDA. They are in complete control of school lunches. But the idea that the dietary guidelines are, for the first time, saying reduce your consumption of ultra-processed foods, so all of these addictive natures of food that are associated with all kinds of bad health, diabetes, heart disease, stroke later in life, the idea that they're being demonized publicly is a great thing. So, Jamie, no, it's not new. But what's new is that the Secretary of Health is using his bully pulpit to try to demonize them. What are the next steps to try to make any of this work? It's a federal definition of ultra-processed food, which they promised would be released in April. They say they've got it ready. Here we are in June. We can hope in the next couple of months. That's really important, because once you define them, Secretary Rollins can say to schools, you've got 5 years to get these out of school lunches.
Yeah.
California has done this. California passed a statewide bill saying you've got 3 years, school systems, public schools, to get ultra-processed foods out of school lunch. It's just starting now. If they're trying to make their own definition, a federal definition of ultra-processed foods would be hugely helpful.
What are we talking about? We're talking about no hot dogs, much to, I'm sure, Jim Browdy's chagrin.
And please don't say no
No,
sun
that's-
chips, because that's my weakness.
I can't see, it's going to be really tough. I'm saying they're going to come out with a definition. I'm not saying it's going to be a particularly good or usable or practical one, but I am saying it's going to be better than nothing. So maybe Jim's sausages are not going to, hot dogs are not going to comply, but you can bet that the minute there's a federally backed definition, all of the big food companies will race to reformulate their products so that they can qualify. And that's going to be a huge step forward.
Interesting. You know, I got to say, when I was at the market the other day, I saw that Cool Ranch Doritos, there's now a new offering of Cool Ranch Doritos without food coloring. And I think it just means there are no blue specks that make it Cool Ranch. And I thought, is this the step in the right direction? Is this really going to change things?
Is it? It's still a Dorito.
It's not going to change
Still
the
a
thing.
Dorito. All right.
Well, we're talking with food policy analyst Corby Kummer. I am obsessed with sauerkraut. Can we talk about this?
And you're also obsessed with algae. So I
Well,
think we
you know what? Maybe they're related. Maybe they're the same thing. Because, Corby, I was at my favorite private members-only club this weekend, Costco, and I am now the proud owner of a barrel of sauerkraut. It's taking up my whole fridge.
Why is that?
You know,
though?
given that it's
don't know.
Costco,
It's
I
something about
believe you
it.
that it's a barrel.
It's huge. It's huge. And I bought it specifically because I was influenced by Maha, I guess. Why is everyone in D.C. eating sauerkraut, or are they?
Well, apparently several cabinet members are eating sauerkraut, all influenced by a wellness doctor who charges $18,000 for a preliminary consult.
Yeah, I got
to
mine
help
for
you
free.
improve your diet and your health. And RFK Jr. like sneak sauerkraut onto planes. What's the point of this? It's naturally fermented foods, which are really good for your gut, microbiome. They're very good for gut health. That's all really good. And the idea that it is going to be the basis of your diet, any fad diet, Jamie Bologna, in which you eat a lot of one thing and eat less of another thing, probably something highly caloric and less healthful, is going to make you lose weight. Another part of the sauerkraut obsession among the cabinet and Maha people that isn't as publicized, I'm glad to report, is that they have steak every night. They have sauerkraut during the day, and they have steak and red meat at night because they
so far, I'm
really
not seeing the
believe
problem, Corby.
Yeah, Jamie, are you
I'm kidding.
intending to have steak every night?
No.
This does sound sort of like disordered eating too. I mean, if you're only eating sauerkraut and steak throughout the day, that's
Christina, you should be a social media influencer. I want millions of your followers to say, yes, it's disordered eating. That's right.
Though I am a fan of fermented foods, I prefer kimchi over sauerkraut. Sauerkraut a little goes a long way. I like it on a sausage, but
do they have the same benefits?
yeah, they're both both are really great
they
for your
do.
gut microbiome. But so is
Right.
also like eating like fresh fruits and vegetables and lentils and beans and whole grains, and quinoa, stuff like that.
Thank you, Christina. I again want you posting constantly.
Okay, will do.
Can I ask my obvious question?
What's that?
If you dry out the algae from the reflecting pool, can you eat that?
I love how you're sneaking the White House the reflecting pool algae
I
into
caught this
every
disease
segment.
from
And
Marjorie last week.
Sounds like you caught it from the algae.
If you ferment it first.
Oh, okay. Yes, of course.
That's a good idea. We're
Great
talking
point.
with Corby Kummer. Where do you want to go next?
I think we should talk about Ina Garten because the Barefoot Contessa has a new podcast out, and we already love the Barefoot Contessa because she's a good hang. But her
It's coming in what, September, I think?
I think it's coming up, yes, this fall. And it's called Happy Hour with Ina Garten, and she's going to be drinking on the job, which sounds like a lot of fun.
So do you remember the picture of Cosmopolitans in her East Hampton mansion spread that really revived us during the pandemic?
Yes.
She acted half drunk as she was putting essentially an entire bottle of vodka and some fruit juice into a tall crystal pitcher with one of those endlessly tall spoons as bigger than knitting needles, and say, this is how you're going to get through the next couple of years, everybody, and why don't you just be as mellow as I? So she's enormously popular in that same East Hampton kitchen and studio. She's filmed her hugely popular TV shows, and now she's going to podcasting, which she'll be doing from her equally fabulous New York, Manhattan, Upper East Side kitchen, and inviting friends for longer discussions that she could have while she was telling them how to spatchcock a chicken. So she's going to be inviting influencers, not necessarily food people, and talking about how they changed careers. Ina Garten is 78. She didn't start broadcasting till her 50s, and she's hugely, hugely popular. So much so that every podcast company demanded to get in on this deal, and it's something like $8 or $9 million.
Wow.
They laid on the sauerkraut barrelhead to get her contract. One of the interesting parts of this piece was that podcasts are actually more and more threatened, they're more and more expensive, and therefore companies have to rely on big names and trusted names and audience getters. And so they went after this contract for Ina Garten. She's tremendously engaging and thoughtful and fun as a person, so I'm sure it's going to be a success.
Well, there are a couple of lines in this New York Times story about it. Ms. Garten said, video podcasting offers an appealing messiness that could be lacking on a traditional show. I think we relate to that
Case
here
in
at
point,
BPR.
look at us.
And then later on, it says, video podcasts cater to that parasocial engagement that people increasingly crave with their favorite creators. Again, another thing that we could relate to. Corby, do you know her?
Sure, I've met her. She's like one of the very few big names in food I have not crossed paths with a lot. Partly it's because she didn't make it her business to show up at every food conference, at every food gathering, at every award ceremony. She built a tremendously successful business model by building her own studio and really having this colony, this empire in East Hampton and the Hamptons. Very unlike Martha Stewart, who did very similar things. It was very influential in getting Ina Garten started at the beginning by promoting her. But Martha's everywhere at once. You see her at every event. She's amazing. She shows up. Ina has sort of concentrated her energy between Paris, where she's got a house, and East Hampton. So, no.
Oh, I was hoping for an introduction.
We were hoping
everybody wants an introduction to Ina.
We want to hang out in her East Hampton house. I'll hang out with her anywhere, really.
Yeah, seriously, the beach, anywhere. We're talking with food policy analyst Corby Kummer. Corby, you mentioned this earlier, so we do want to get to it. We were talking about the bipartisan bill to revive regional food programs, and you also mentioned this piece in Politico that specifically looked at Maine and the unraveling of the SNAP program there. And I know this was a deep dive in Maine, but this is happening across the country. Again, is there an explanation as to why this is happening?
So, cuts to SNAP, which are 20% of funding over the next, I think, 5 years, are going to be absolutely calamitous because SNAP lifts families out of poverty. It helps children perform better in school, actually utilize school, because a hungry kid is an attention disordered kid who cannot really absorb what's happening in school. It's depriving people who take care of their parents and are unable to work. So what did it do? It increased the so-called work requirements so that you have to constantly prove to the administrators of the SNAP program that you are looking for work. Study after study has shown that work requirements don't return people to the workforce, whatever the USDA says in justifying them, but it's a way of throwing people off the rolls. The main origin of these cuts is that during the One Big Beautiful attempt to cut public spending, the biggest pot of money and the most tempting pot of money by far was food assistance. Between 80 and $84 billion a year. So going after that was going to be the only way they could prove these cost savings that would offset these tax cuts for billionaires. What was their excuse? That there was a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse because people weren't looking for work. They weren't requalifying often enough and filling out the paperwork. Those paperwork requirements were loosened during the pandemic, a great thing. Summer feeding programs for children who qualified for free school meals increased, made universal during the pandemic. Fantastic things. They sunsetted. And so they ended, and the Trump administration wanted to not just never bring those back, but greatly reduce the number of people who get them. Plus, they reduced SNAP-Ed. What is SNAP-Ed? It's education to help people use their fresh fruits and vegetables, which a lot of people don't have the time and don't have the knowledge to do. Maine, as documented in this Politico piece under Governor Janet Mills, who recently withdrew from the Senate race, was trying to find state money for education, for SNAP-Ed, trying to cobble together money, as did Massachusetts, to get more money and not have the effects of this be lessened. But another part of the One Big Beautiful Bill is it's making states pay for part of the administration of it. That's a staff line that most state budgets don't have, and already the USDA has greatly shrunk its workforce by firing people.
Right.
That means that people who do qualify, even under these new restrictive rules for SNAP, can't call anybody, can't show up. They wait hours. They can't get their benefits.
That's a mess. Okay. Well, Corby, thank you. We've been
Thank you,
speaking with Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and a Senior Lecturer at Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. Coming up after this quick break, Sky and Telescope Editor Kelly Beatty. I'm Christina Quinn. He's Jamie Bologna. We're in for Jim and Marjorie, and you're listening to BPR on 89.7 GBH and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
On Boston Common, the Embrace Monument has given the city a new landmark for love, labor, and a longing for freedom. Now, Embrace Boston is moving that conversation indoors, with plans for a Frederick Douglass Civic Center in downtown Crossing, a home for exhibitions, gathering, and education. President and CEO Amari Paris Jeffries joins us to talk about the building, the timing, and what Boston chooses to remember and embrace next. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the University of Rhode Island's College of Business with an online Master's of Science in Supply Chain Management designed to prepare students to develop resilient and flexible supply chain strategies. uri.edu/MS Supply Chain. And Native Plant Trust. More than 125 years of commitment to protecting New England's native plants. More information about how natives can support the web of life at nativeplanttrust.org.
Welcome back to BPR on 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I'm BPR executive producer Jamie Bologna. I'm still here with Fighting Crime podcast host Christina Quinn.
Still here.
Still soldiering on, filling in for Jim and Marjorie. Don't worry, Mom and Dad will be back tomorrow at the BPL with Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell for Ask the AG. We're joined now on Zoom by Sky and Telescope senior editor and host of the new monthly What's Up podcast.
First, we'll watch Venus and Jupiter dance at dusk, keep a lookout for a stellar explosion, and track down a snake handler in the early summer sky. So grab your curiosity and come along on this month's Sky Tour.
That's, of course, Kelly Beatty, senior editor at Sky and Telescope. Hello, Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
Hey, Jamie, Christina. Great to be with you.
Good to have you.
Great to have you here. We will get into what's up a little bit, but first, I want to talk about summer solstice because it was just yesterday, June 21st. It was also my brother's birthday. Happy birthday, Kenji.
Perfect, sister.
Thank you. There we go.
Great.
But there were some interesting things that I didn't know about our planet that I'm like, oh, this is news to me. And maybe you can tell us what was so interesting. It has to do, I think, spoiler, here's my hint, the way our planet is tilted.
Yeah, so our planet is tilted off vertical with respect to the sun by about 23 degrees. And that means that sometimes we're in our orbit, we're pointed, the northern hemisphere is pointed toward the sun and then sometimes away. That's summer and winter.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the time, what this means is that the sun's position in the sky is constantly changing over the course of the year.
Right.
And when we're most tilted toward the sun up here in the U.S., there comes a point at which the sun is as farthest north in the sky as it can be.
Right.
That word solstice comes from the word sun standing still. And so it kind of gets as far north and then it turns around and heads south. And that is what we're celebrating, this turnaround point of the sun.
Right. But the discovery is why the Earth is off kilter, which maybe I just didn't know this. It's a discovery for me. This is my self-discovery that's happening in real time on BPR, is that the Earth is off kilter. Because I just the Earth is off kilter on its axis because that's just the way gravity works or whatever. But the planet Earth is off kilter because of like years and years of being pummeled by other planets early in formation.
The technical scientific definition is we're not really sure.
Oh, okay. That makes me feel better then. Perfect.
But it could have been, we think that the moon formed when something the size of Mars smacked into Earth. And that and other impacts could have gradually tilted us over away from, straight up and down. Whatever the reason, it is what it is. And that's the most logical, that we just got hit off kilter and we remain that way today.
There.
So wait, can I just ask, are the other planets not off kilter? I feel very off kilter, but are is Mercury, are the other ones off too?
Most of them are. Mars, for example, has a tilt almost exactly as the Earth. Jupiter and Saturn, because they're the big gorillas in the room, they're not tilted as much, but Saturn actually is, and we see that in its rings, tilted sometimes towards, so they're beautifully open. It varies from planet to planet, so that's why we think this impact process was at play for all of the planets, not just Earth.
That's cool. I think space is cool.
Can I go negative?
It is.
Well, yeah, go fine.
Well, because Kelly said something earlier that is the truth. We're headed in the other direction. We're headed south now. It's it. Summer's over.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
You're
Is that true?
You're a good
No.
time, Jamie.
No. Yeah.
It's fun at parties.
Winter is coming.
Winter is coming. I felt it. I felt the cold breath of winter on my neck yesterday.
Actually, it did. The temperatures did dip yesterday, and my 8-year-old said, "Why is it cold on the first day of summer?"
Because it's all downhill from here.
Because it's all downhill from here, says Jamie Bologna. Thank you.
Yeah. Nelly negative here. Well, since we're talking solstice and negativity, let's do something positive. There are these pits near Stonehenge. 48 of them. What is the point
What's
of
up
that?
with the pits?
What's up with the pits? What were they trying to do?
So first thing you need to know, so Stonehenge, its earliest beginnings date from about 3000 BC, 5,000 years ago. And that whole area of southern England was inhabited, we know, as early as 7,000 or 8,000 BC, right after the end of the Ice Age. So lots was happening in this particular area. And we know of Stonehenge, because we see it on the news all the time, as a place where there is an alignment with this solstice, with the rising sun in the middle of summer. And so what was discovered is nearby, in a little town nearby, about 3 miles to the east, is another set of pits and burial grounds and all kinds of activity like was happening in that area. And in particular, they found 2 pits about 400 feet apart, into which likely posts were put, and those aligned with the summer solstice, would have aligned with the summer solstice too. And by the way, I have to say, if you want to know when the summer solstice is happening, just grab some of those snow stakes, find a hilltop, and stick 2 of them in the ground, and you too can align to the summer solstice.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
The real issue here is that we know that these new pits, which have been excavated because the Army's taking over the area, and they did a careful archaeological dig first, had to have been in place almost exactly 3000 BC. And that predates what we think of Stonehenge today, which was built, the big circle of standing stones, by 400 or 500 years. So maybe this predated Stonehenge. The problem is that Stonehenge wasn't built all at once. It was built over several centuries. And
because they were wicked heavy.
I'm sorry?
They're wicked heavy.
Yeah. The fine print is that we don't know whether there was such an alignment at Stonehenge too when it was first built. So in other words, they would have been about the same age. But regardless, it's an important scientific find, and that's why it made the news.
And is the point to see the sun at this? What is the point of these places? Or we don't know.
It's called, so they're pointing toward the solstice, where the sun stands still in either the middle of June or in the middle of December. And one important thing to remember is that this same alignment toward the sunrise in June also points to the sunset in December. It's in the opposite direction.
Yeah, you know what, Christina? In December, I say the same thing.
You say what?
Winter's over.
Oh my goodness.
Well, exactly. And
We're done.
Jamie, it could well be that the original reason for these alignments wasn't to mark the beginning of the middle of summer, but in fact to mark the turnaround point in winter when better days would be ahead.
I've never been to Stonehenge.
Me neither.
But do they have a gift shop?
Yes.
They do. Sorry.
No, it's like a travel segment. What are we doing?
But Christina, you won't be alone. Millions of people visit Stonehenge every year, so you'll be in the crowd.
Okay. All right. Cool. Do
you want to talk about the Swift Observatory?
I would love to talk about the Swift. There is a Swift Observatory. This telescope, sort of like a satellite telescope, that is hurtling towards Earth. I had never heard of it, but it's been circling in space for 20 years, and we are trying to capture it. It's like straight out of kind of like a Armageddon. Was it Armageddon?
Armageddon.
Armageddon.
They went and
Yeah, with Bruce Willis.
And Steven Tyler. Oh, that was a different thing.
No. I think it was the soundtrack.
Music, yeah.
It was the music. Anyway, yeah. So tell us about that. Tell us about the
Well,
Swift.
yeah, there's no danger from it. It's been in orbit since 2004, and it seeks out gamma rays in our universe, the most powerful kind of radiation. So it's really important that there are other satellites that do this, but this one has been around. It's perfectly functioning. The problem is that it's sinking lower and lower in the atmosphere. And NASA predicts that it will come crashing to Earth sometime later this year.
Okay.
And it's perfectly functioning. So they wanted to try to preserve it. It turns out that there is a company that NASA has contracted with called Catalyst Space that had been planning to launch this sort of rescue spacecraft later this year, just as a test. But now it can have a real world, come in and save the day.
Yeah.
Swift was never meant to be refurbished or grabbed onto. So this spacecraft, which is going to be launched just within a few days, will go up, rendezvous with it, grab onto it, and gradually ease it to a higher orbit so that it can last longer and continue its scientific work.
So cool.
That is really cool. I think they should put like a camera. Can they mount like a selfie cam on?
Oh, I'm sure they'll be streaming it, right?
I absolutely agree. I think there'll be live pictures. Why wouldn't you, right? This is like a heroic act. And the thing is, lots of these spacecraft in orbit aren't meant to be visited, but this could open up a whole new cottage industry of refurbishing and maintaining spacecraft that would otherwise come falling to Earth.
Yeah, why not? It's renewable. If you can refurbish your iPhone,
save some money.
Refurbish the telescope.
Kelly, we're almost out of time here, but we did mention it at the top, and we want to hear just a minute here about your podcast. What is it, and who's it for?
I have been doing this since 2006. Podcast hadn't been invented yet. It's like a 15-minute program. It's audio only, although there's a YouTube version of it that's illustrated. But it's intended for you to take it outside on an evening, listen to it. No equipment necessary, no experience necessary, and I walk you around the sky and show you the cool stuff that's up. It's called Sky Tour. You can Google that. It's on the skyandtelescope.org website, or as I mentioned on YouTube, the illustrated version. And it's something I love to do because I want people to understand what's going on in the sky, give us all a better appreciation. And you know what? Astronomy doesn't have to be hard. It's not all about gamma rays. It can be just beautiful, and that's what I aim to show.
That's lovely.
That is lovely. I'm going to listen. I'm going to put out a picnic blanket and take a listen.
You just hear
watching
Kelly's
the night
dulcet
sky.
tones as you're watching.
There's some lovely sound design in it.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. We have been speaking with Kelly Beatty, Sky and Telescope senior editor and host of the monthly What's Up podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up after this quick break, have kids' birthday parties gone too far? Thousands of dollars to celebrate a 2-year-old? That's bananas. And what about the dozens of other birthdays you have to go to for all your toddler's friends? We will open the lines to get your thoughts on Big Birthday. That's next. I'm Christina Quinn. He's Jamie Bologna. We're in for Jim and Marjorie, and you're listening to BPR on 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Before the battles of Lexington and Concord, there was a revolt in Worcester. Before his famous midnight ride, Paul Revere spread ideas with cartoons. And before the Commonwealth, it was just a colony. This year, GBH News is bringing together the people, places, and untold stories that turned Massachusetts from colony to Commonwealth. Available now at gbh.org/America250. Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And MIT Federal Credit Union, banking built on innovation, guided by real people. Memberships open to the public. More at mitfcu.org, federally insured by NCUA. And The Huntington, the Tony Award and Pulitzer Prize-winning satirical comedy Eureka Day, is playing at the Huntington through June 28th. Written by Jonathan Spector. Tickets at huntingtontheater.org.
Welcome back to BPR on 897 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH.
What station is this?
Well, I don't know. I wrote the wrong thing here, and so I'm just trying to not get it wrong.
It's okay.
I'm BPR executive producer Jamie Bologna, here with Fighting Crime host Christina Quinn. We're filling in for Jim and Marjorie. But don't worry, they'll be back tomorrow at the BPL with the Attorney General for Ask the AG.
Do you think they're listening right now?
Probably.
Hi, Mom.
I'm
Hi,
surprised
Dad.
they haven't sent a lot of. Well, I don't know. We are getting some nice texts and
some anonymous ones.
Some anonymous. Yeah. Apparently, I'm talking too much, so I'll just. You could do this one, and I'll just sit here like a potted plant, I guess. We're gonna end the show today with kids' birthdays. Somewhere along the past few decades, birthday parties for kids became a measure of how devoted you are as a parent. Think extravagant goodie bags, petting zoos in the backyard, decorations befitting a gala, not just toddler stuff, like big money.
Yeah.
So have we done something wrong, especially with costs rising across nearly every sector of the economy? Should we realign our priorities and say no thanks to the big birthday industrial complex? Or is your little one just so special that they deserve an all-out bash every year? 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text. Why aren't we just sending our kids into the ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese anymore? Although when I was a kid, they had a ball pit at McDonald's
they did
and Burger King.
Yeah.
I had so many birthdays at Burger King. Or are kids' birthday parties just adapting to changing times, where it means now more than ever gathering in person really matters? We talked about this at the top of the show. You're only young once. 877-301-8970. Call or text. Are you done with the kids' birthdays, or will you do whatever it takes to make the day special for your perfect little one?
Speaking of which, we had my daughter Josephine's birthday party on Friday. She turned 8, and we had it at the beach because you don't have to pay for venue space at the beach. This is our 3rd year in a row of throwing her birthday at the beach.
So how does it work?
Well, I'm vigilant. We just, we're on guard, making sure but yeah, we had balloons as a beacon so everyone could find us. I gave parents the heads up where to find us. We did bring a tent, but it was too windy, and that was okay. Yes.
Yes, those are your guests.
Thank you for the requisite seagull sound effects. And the kids had a blast. We ordered pizzas. We had a big cooler full of beverages and cupcakes, and it was a really great time. And I think now it's officially a tradition. And what's nice is that it's not really part of the big birthday industrial complex.
Yeah, and you don't have to clean your house. You don't have to rent the place.
Yeah.
Well, we've been going to a lot of these sort of jumpy place birthday parties.
Ooh, but like a trampoline
Cowabunga trampoline park kind of thing.
Trampoline parks.
Which I've actually been liking because, this is going to sound so lame, but I like that it has a set start time and a set end time. Like you rent the thing for whatever time.
Like
there's
90
the
minutes.
pizza, 90 minutes. There's the cake, there's the pizza, the sing, the kids are happy, and then you can be out of there and you can live your life. Because we were reading a piece this morning about Emily Oster, who's at Brown and has a podcast, and she was talking about how she just says no to anything that's on Sunday because she values that family time regardless of whose birthday it is. And I kind of appreciate that, you know, just making time for your own family on Sunday. That's your time.
Yeah. I think throwing a birthday party on Sunday is I don't know, that's pretty rare. And I kind of can see why you'd want to sort of reclaim that time for family time. I do think that big birthday became a thing when it seemed like, I don't know, I think like when you're in preschool and kindergarten, you are sort of required to invite every single person in class, which is a really nice idea. So everyone feels included. That said, that's a lot of kids. That's a lot of guests. And usually when they're that young, the parents stay. And so suddenly you have to host dozens of people, strangers. And I think a lot of people are like, I don't want that in my house, or maybe I can't even fit that in my house. And so they outsource the space and the entertainment to a third party, whether it's at, a trampoline park or the community center or wherever it is. But we do see a lot of parents spending copious amounts of money for, a 5-year-old birthday party or even younger.
What kind of birthday parties did you have as a kid?
We always had it at my house, and we would have a dance party in the basement, in our finished basement. And we would wear cone hats.
And those little paper.
Yeah.
What were those things
like
called?
a paper kazoo.
That thing that goes.
Noisemakers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are fun.
I mean, that's to me sort of how, like, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, and that's sort of how a party went down. So I try to stick with being practical as much as possible. So does my husband. We try to be like, let's be practical. How do we, not take out a mortgage so we can celebrate our kids' birthdays?
Yeah, and at the same time, you want it to be memorable.
Yes.
877-301-8970, the kids' birthday party industrial complex, and you, has it gotten out of hand, or do you like it? Your kid's young once, and why not spoil them once a year or every other day? We have Mary in Mansfield texting, over-the-top birthday parties are really for parents to show off, not for the kids.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see that's sort of like a status symbol, right? Like, how much money are you going to throw down for your kid's birthday? But I don't know. I mean, yeah, she's got a good point. I think it's kind of gross, though.
For me, it wasn't a birthday unless we had a Carvel ice cream cake.
Oh, wow, that's living large.
With those little crunchy things in the middle.
Oh, I love those, the cookie crumble.
Those were the best. They still have them, right?
Yeah, they definitely still have them. I think that, no ice cream cake is complete without those. You, though, I think you're kind of bearing the lead here about your childhood birthday experiences. Guys, Jamie had a pony. He had a pony as a kid.
Yes. I don't know what that has to do with birthday parties. I made the mistake of sharing that with you this morning in confidence.
And I think now you need to share it with our listeners because, first of all, you had a pony. And you grew up in Methuen. Today I learned that there's enough room in Methuen to have a pony.
Oh, look at this. We have a caller. Sarah Littleton.
You're changing the subject.
Sarah,
I see.
you're first on whatever this is. Christina Quinn grills Jamie here. Hey, Sarah.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thanks for saving me from pony talk.
Hello.
Hello.
So, do you want to hear what I'm thinking about these birthday parties?
Yes, Sarah, tell us.
Okay. Well, I think I have a kind of unique perspective. I've got twin boys. They just turned 10, and we've been doing these big birthday parties every year, and my husband and I completely acknowledge how over the top they are. Sort of. I mean, compared to our birthday parties, if we even had them in the 80s and 90s, right? Mm-hmm. But I will say, this past birthday, we tried to go just do it at home like they did when we were kids and save money. But the problem with that is there's no these trampoline parks, for example, that host these parties. They will tell you can only have so many people.
Right.
And when we tried to have the party at home, I didn't have that limit. And so I felt bad saying no. We ended up with 30 boys for a sleepover at our house.
Whoa.
And
oh, my goodness.
That was crazy.
You had
and you know what?
sleepover?
We probably ended up spending as much. Yes, because I can't say no. I don't want any kids at school finding out.
Yeah.
So I appreciate, you know what? I'll go ahead and spend. I'm not going to say how much one of my kids is sitting right here. I'll go ahead and spend the money because I do like the fact, as mentioned earlier, that they limit the time, but also they limit the number of guests so that I don't have 30 boys running around my whole house for 24 hours.
Well, you are brave. That sounds like a social experiment. Hosting 30 boys.
Is your house still standing? My goodness.
I don't even know how it is. And it was an experiment, and I learned a lot. I definitely learned a lot.
Okay. So maybe lesson learned there is not doing that again. Outsource it to another venue.
At the same time, 10 is a big
birthday,
birthday,
10
right?
is a big birthday. You did it, though, Mom. And that was a memorable, that will be a core memory for sure.
That's true. Thanks so much.
Thanks for calling, Sarah. John in Marlborough texts, it's hard to find birthday venues lower than $1,000 for us.
What?
Our local playground was great, and the beach is a great idea. Too bad we don't live that close to an ocean beach, but we are near lake beaches. Yeah, I've been to a lot of kids' birthday parties at playgrounds.
Yes,
that's
a good time.
Splash pad kind of thing in the summer or whatever.
They got picnic tables. Yeah. Wow.
Oh my goodness. So this drives Jim crazy, and now I understand why. So the staff has put a note on the screen that says we have exclusive sound of the pony scaring Jamie when he was a kid, which is never the actual thing. But
aren't you? You're not going to talk about the pony?
Well, let's hear the sound of the pony, I guess.
All right, fine. Can we hear it? Wow.
Okay, guys.
Nailed it.
Let's go to Jacob in North Providence. You're next on BPR 89.7 GBH.
Hi, Jacob.
Hi, second time caller. Actually, when I called, Jim might take a kick on this. I had, I believe, 6 or 7 kids, and I'm up to 9 at this point. So,
wow,
congratulations!
Yeah, thank you. It's of the active household, and to the point of the parties. Yeah, I think at this point, you know, the establishments that already got everything set up is where we go much of the times. I won't say staunch, but I'm more reserved in the parties, and I keep all the the financial resources more towards like the Christmas and stuff and certain holidays. But my wife she's all the birthdays. She's the opposite. She's like, yeah, let's. So you can imagine all those years of birthday parties and I would say at this point, you start, if they have the place already ready to go, and the numbers look okay, then we'll go toward that because of this logistic stuff. As somebody noted, inviting the friends and then the parents and then the timing of it, and that works nowadays. So that becomes a little bit challenging at times. But again, if we can keep it at one shot outsource, we'll do that. But I'll be honest, there's times where my wife was like, "Hey, we need to do something." The kids we try to keep it around the 10. When they turn 10, do something, because in my mind, around that time is where you remember your birthday. You remember that as a
That's
kid.
true.
So
That's true. Yeah.
So we'll keep it around like that age, and for the boys, it's been something active. And my older ones, while they were 10, those places like lunch wasn't too like popular or big. Now I have essentially 3 groups, so I don't want to go into it too much. But now that my youngest son is older, we have this place and we can do that. On the flip side, for the girls, sometimes it's more of a little social, and we want to get together with her girls, go to play dates, go to movies, things like that. So the idea of parties kind of switches depending on which type of kid we're looking at.
Right.
But for the
You're
most
strategic.
part, we try to also say.
You have 9? How do you get around? You take the T?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting. I call it 3 groups. So it's the breakdown. It's 22, 21, 19, 13, 12, 10, 8, 3, and then my baby girl, she's about 7, 8 months now.
Wow, Jacob, what a show off.
Congratulations.
You're amazing.
I can barely handle one.
You're an overperformer, guys. That's incredible. Wow.
Hey, listen, my hairline's paying for it, guys. Don't you worry. There's a trade-off somewhere.
You sound happy, Jacob.
You
and that's
sound
what
happy.
counts, right?
Yes. Well done. Well done.
Thank you, Jacob, for the call.
Thank you so much. We have a call from the UK. Sarah in the UK. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello. How'd you find us?
Can you hear me? I lived in Malden for 13 years.
Oh, nice.
Welcome.
Welcome back.
Yeah, so long time. Yeah, I lived in Boston, and I was listening because I still listen to BPR over here. And my daughter just had a birthday this past weekend, and my heart goes out to Sarah with her story about 30 boys in her house, because I had 8 girls, and that was overwhelming. My daughter is 7. But what I called to say is I find when you have to invite the whole class, it's so overwhelming. I remember those days from when my son was in preschool and the pressure. And when he was 3, my husband came up with the idea, kind of like your idea of just going to the beach, because we lived in Malden. We had like walking trails, and he's just like, let's just invite the kids on a walk. And we did. We invited kids, and they all came, and the kids ran around and had fun, and parents got to talk to each other. So that's what we ended up doing.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
So we didn't have to invite everyone. So yeah.
Well, Sarah, you're sort of speaking to what we have an anonymous texter here who said, why does a birthday have to be memorable? It just has to be fun, and nobody remembers all their birthdays. The experience is what matters, and you're kind of you're living that.
I think the idea of
it is true.
Great. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, well, my son we have a picture of him from when he was 3 holding hands with 2 of his friends, and he still looks back and sees that and can remember them. So, maybe not strong memories, but, they had a good time. There's some memories to be had.
Right. They had a good time. And that's really the point. You don't need to fork over a huge chunk of change to host a good time. And I love the idea of going on a walk. It's like very very Thoreau, right? It's sort of
Or
like
however you're supposed to pronounce it. I don't know what the right thing is. There's like a whole, it was in the New York Times and Jared was right or not right. I don't remember.
Bemotriazinol.
Bepmethylpristinol. It's the new sunscreen.
Thank you,
Thanks
Sarah.
for the call, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, so what you're saying is we don't all have to buy our kids a pony.
We don't have to. Don't have to buy our kids a pony, though. I do think that the big birthday industrial complex will not go away anytime soon, just because it's it's the nature of the beast, and a lot of people don't want to host at home. I also understand if you're like both parents are working, it's kind of hard to get the house ready, and then afterwards you got to clean up, and we want to kind of keep it simple, and keeping it simple often means or can mean doing it somewhere else. But it does come at a price. I can't get over the person who texted us earlier about how you can't find a birthday venue for less than $1,000. That's really hard to imagine. We have another caller on the phone, Suzanne from Maynard.
I don't think we have time actually to get to that because
I'm sorry.
Edgar is somewhere. I guess I don't know.
Another time, Suzanne.
He's got a show coming up. Sorry, Suzanne. But we've got, who do we have here? Let me just read a text while Edgar comes in. Oh, Anne in Rhode Island points out Sunday birthday party. Observant Jewish families cannot have parties on Saturdays. That makes sense.
No, that's a good point. Yep.
It's thorough.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Thorough.
Hi,
Edgar.
This is
hello. Hi, everybody. This is
like
what they
10
say.
years of this thing.
So here's my theory on the children's birthday thing. So the thing that is going to change the experience more than the money you spend is outside of your control, which is what time of year does it happen? Does it happen during the school year?
Totally.
Or does it happen during the summer?
Right.
So I have summertime birthday,
That's
which
right.
means like sometimes my friends would come to the birthday, but it's only like your best of friends because at that point you haven't been in school.
Right.
So it was always like a family affair.
Yeah.
But it also got to happen outdoors in our backyard, etc. My sister had a wintertime birthday. Now she always got all of the kids in the class were a part of it. So we did something which we waited too long to do. We've only done it, I think it was last year. We switched birthdays so that she could experience a summertime.
Can you do that?
Well, we just
My
chose to.
sister's
Hurwicks did.
3 years younger. I would
Hurwicks
gladly
did it.
switch with her.
So we switched, and that was a revelatory experience. So we had a party in the backyard for her birthday in August,
yeah.
and then December rolled around, and I got to experience a wintertime birthday.
You just did this recently?
Yeah.
What was it like for you experiencing your birthday in the winter?
It was strange, and the thing that she always complained about is the fact that her birthday is just a couple of weeks before Christmas, so they sort of bled
So she got
together.
sort of the
But I
short-
was
yeah.
always like, well, we would often go and get our Christmas tree on her birthday, or we would do something Christmas. We went to see Santa Claus the movie. We rented out the theater one year she got to do cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I did see there is a little bit of bleed in the presents for sure.
Did you get a Christmas tree?
Yeah, for my birthday, yes. I got a
Love
Christmas
it.
tree on my birthday, her birthday. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
So,
great.
absolutely.
What's
Okay.
coming up in just about 3 or so minutes here on the
Well,
Curiosity
I don't know
Desk?
if I don't know how much you've been paying attention or you know this is happening, but the World Cup, we
I've
are in
heard
the
of it.
middle
Heard of it.
of a big soccer event, the World Cup. Well, one of the things that we on the Curiosity Desk feel like has not been talked enough about is the actual turf on which they are playing, which is to say grass. So FIFA. They basically mandate that all World Cup matches have to happen on natural grass. Of course, a lot of these stadiums have artificial turf. So there are people who have been working for years, even decades, on like being able to develop grass that's going to work in these stadiums. And we're going to talk with one of the researchers who's like the guy who has figured out how to do it.
I love this.
Can you
Grass-
ask him if he can play soccer on the algae in the flipping pool? It's green.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough.
If you dry it out?
I don't think it needs to be that dry because I think you do need some
want a
moisture.
little
You
bit.
want a
Moisture.
little moisture. Algae field.
We'll
Look
have
into
to
it.
tune in. We'll
I'll
find
tune in.
out.
Yeah, we'll look into it.
Thanks, Edgar.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another edition of BPR on 89.7 GBH. Keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, Jim and Marjorie are back at the library with Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell from 11 to 12, plus Mass Political Party chairs Amy Carnival and Steve Kerrigan, and Martha Walsh and Marcia Warfield join ahead of its reigning queens at the Regent. Our crew is Zoe Matthews, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, and Ariana Gonzalez. Maddie Geyer runs our YouTube stream. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. Hey, that's you.
I gotta get back to that.
Man of many
Hey, I know
hats.
that guy.
Stay tuned to the Curiosity Desk starting immediately after us on 89.7 GBH and the Culture Show with Jared Bowen starting at 2. I'm Christina Quinn.
I'm Jamie Bologna.
Hope you can tune in tomorrow. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you.
From the stories of centuries past to discoveries that will define our future, How Did We Get Here's how-tos and more. Journey with us down the rabbit hole on the Curiosity Desk. Coming up next on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Mass General Brigham. In heart surgery, expertise matters. Mass General Brigham Heart and Vascular Institute performs thousands of surgeries each year and is committed to research and innovation. massgeneralbrigham.org/heart. And Neville Place Assisted Living in Cambridge, providing residents with a range of services designed to help seniors stay sharp, social, and independent. More at nevilleplace.org/care.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org.
I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Today on the Curiosity Desk, this year the Trump administration has been moving to ease restrictions on commercial fishing around the coasts. At risk, the only U.S. Marine National Monument in the Atlantic Ocean, the Seamounts, which sits about 150 miles off the coast of the Cape. What deregulation means for our oceans, and a new lawsuit aiming to shift the tide. Then we're looking at some landmark moments and figures from Massachusetts' LGBT history. Most people's knowledge starts and ends with the legalization of same-sex marriage, but there's so much that led up to that moment. And finally, for this World Cup, one team of researchers spent 6 years developing state-of-the-art turf for the converted soccer stadiums. How much does the quality of grass really impact play? Turns out, a lot. Like a lot. It's all ahead this hour on the Curiosity Desk.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Amy Held. High-level peace talks have come to a close in Switzerland, with the U.S. and Iran agreeing to a roadmap to reach a final deal. But the two sides have different accounts about how to get there. Vice President J.D. Vance says Tehran agreed to allow UN nuclear inspectors into the country, but Iran's foreign ministry spokesman says they did not negotiate their nuclear program. And when it comes to American voters, they're skeptical, and the majority oppose President Trump's handling of the war he started and is trying to end. NPR's Mara Liasson reports on pushback even within Trump's own base.
Trump is struggling to sell it. He's getting criticism from both wings of his own party. There are some in the Make America Great Again MAGA base who are angry that he went to war in the first place. Many of them voted for him because he promised not to get involved in any more foreign wars. And they don't feel like the U.S. has achieved anything of value so far.
That's NPR's Mara Liasson reporting. A new order from the Supreme Court has further weakened the Federal Voting Rights Act in 7 states, mainly in the Midwest. NPR's Hansi Lo Wang reports the order comes out of a case about the landmark law's protections for disabled voters and for voters who are unable to read or write.
The Supreme Court is leaving in place a lower court ruling that strikes down a key tool for protecting voters with a disability or an inability to read or write. That ruling applies to Arkansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Across the country, lawsuits by voters and advocacy groups have been the main way of enforcing the Voting Rights Act's protections for voters with a disability or inability to read or write. But last year, a ruling by a federal appeals panel agreed with a novel argument by Republican state officials in Arkansas that only the U.S. Attorney General has the right to sue to enforce that protection. The Supreme Court has now refused to review the panel's ruling. The move comes about 2 months after the Supreme Court's conservative supermajority weakened the Voting Rights Act's protections against racial discrimination and redistricting. Hansi Lo Wang, NPR News, Washington.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is stepping down. His approval ratings have slumped to a historic low following a landslide win 2 years ago. NPR's Lauren Freyer reports from London the UK is set to get its 7th leader in about a decade.
At a lectern outside 10 Downing Street, Starmer resigned in a tearful speech, paying tribute
to my fantastic wife, Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad.
Polls show Starmer failed to connect with voters and deliver palpable change after budget cuts under the Conservatives. He'll stay on as caretaker until his centre-left Labour Party chooses a new Prime Minister. Nominations begin July 9th. The lead contender is Andy Burnham, the popular outgoing mayor of Manchester, England. Lauren Freyer, NPR News, London.
On Wall Street, stocks are mixed. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court has cleared the way for a proposal that would get rid of the state's party primaries to appear on the November ballot. The decision rejects a challenge from members of the state Democratic Party's governing body that claims the measure violates the state constitution. The Globe reports the court's ruling all but assures that voters will be able to weigh in on the proposal at the polls on November 3rd. It could potentially change how voters pick candidates for some of Massachusetts's high offices. In its 26-page decision, the court ruled that the proposal doesn't significantly interfere with the constitutionally protected right to vote or the rights of people to seek office. And one of Boston's premier Japanese restaurants, Oishi Boston, served its last meals last night. The restaurant, which got its start as a tiny sushi bar in Chestnut Hill in 1998 and then closed 20 years later, opened its Boston location in the South End more than 27 years ago. It was known for its high-end sushi and sashimi creations. The restaurant at 1166 Washington Street said in a social media post that it was grateful to customers, staff, and community for their support. No more Oishi, no more tuna at Oishi, I guess you could say. Their son, Toro. Red Sox and Rockies tonight at 8:40. World Cup matches are just getting underway. Rain rolls in this afternoon, high in the upper 70s. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their dining and entertainment card, Savor. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Welcome, everybody, to the Curiosity Desk here on GBH 89.7. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We're streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. Why not visit us there? Earlier this month, the Trump administration reopened nearly 500,000 square miles of the Pacific Ocean to commercial fishing. Here's President Trump.
Officially reopening nearly 500,000 square miles, of water around northwestern Hawaiian Islands, northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. Why the hell did they close it? Why? Not enough fish, or what's going on? They closed it.
Closer to home, the administration had already reopened fishing in protected waters in the Atlantic, specifically the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument. That area is about 150 miles off the coast of Cape Cod. It's the only marine national monument on the East Coast. Now, this led to a lawsuit from a number of environmental groups, including the Conservation Law Foundation. Given the recent news in the Pacific, we thought it would be a good time to revisit how deregulation on the East Coast is impacting the marine ecosystem and check in on the status of this lawsuit. We're joined now by Jennifer Felt, Ocean Campaign Management Director for the Conservation Law Foundation. Also with us, deep sea ecologist and research associate at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, Taylor Hyle. Welcome, Taylor and Jennifer, to the Curiosity Desk.
Thank you so much. It's excellent to be here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Taylor, I want to start with you because most of us are never going to even get a glimpse of the surface of this place. We're never going to be there. If we see it, it's maybe from out of a plane window or possibly the surface in a boat. But can you take us underwater in this area so that we could get a better picture? What would we see? And also, I'm really interested in understanding what sets this apart from other parts of the ocean. Why are we even talking about this particular place?
Yeah, so this is an incredibly special place on our planet. And most people aren't aware that just off the continental shelf of the Northeast U.S., as you said, about 150 miles from Cape Cod, there are more than 70 submarine canyons and more than 30 seamounts. The canyons and seamounts are ancient rivers and extinct volcanoes. And so they're essentially treasures hidden underwater on our planet. They're known to be hotspots of diversity that host unique ecosystems within them. Despite an increase in exploration and discovery in canyons and seamounts within the past 2 decades, they still remain mostly undiscovered. So if you could drain the ocean away, the canyons off of New England would look like gashes cutting into the continental margin that create sort of funnels from the continental shelf into the abyss. And many of them are deeper than the Grand Canyon. There are also more seamounts than there are major mountains on land, so making these one of the most common large geological features on our planet. So they're incredibly special and important, and they also have amazing ecosystems that live within them that are unique and special to them.
So I hear you saying this. I mean, tell me if I'm picturing this wrong, but you're using language that is making me think of the Grand Canyon and the Rocky Mountains, this sort of landscape that we think of as the American West. You're kind of saying, like, there's that, but it's just underwater.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is like that. The terrain is very similar. However, unlike the Grand Canyon, with all of that red rock, what you see when you descend into the North Atlantic canyons are dynamic, colorful, and diverse coral gardens. So these cold water corals are living and thriving in this environment that we would consider to be really inhospitable and extreme. And they're also slow growing, they're sensitive to disturbance and vulnerable to human activities. They have really long recovery times and low resilience. So we know that they can live to be about 100 to thousands of years old, depending on the species. So they're really incredible.
So, Jennifer, I want to turn to you now. We'll get into the details a little bit of the lawsuit in a minute, but I wonder if you can give us kind of a short history of this area. I mean, as Taylor points out, this is a unique area in terms of geography. It's also a bit of a unique area if we think about sort of your field, in that regulation around fishing in this space has gone back and forth a number of times over recent years, over a long time, it seems now. So can you kind of give us a sense of what has happened in, say, like the last 10, 20 years in terms of regulation of commercial fishing in this particular region?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to emphasize that President Obama designated the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument in recognition of its scientific importance. We know and we understand that the ocean has literally been taking the heat due to climate change for years. It has absorbed 90% of the excess heat, including as well as a quarter of the carbon dioxide resulting from greenhouse gas emissions since the Industrial Revolution. And so the ocean is really this workhorse for us in the battle against climate change. And when we look at that and we look at the impacts on the ocean, we know that it's important for us to protect really important ecosystems. So what marine protected areas like the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument, what they provide us are these really important ecosystems where if we are protecting them, one, we're protecting biodiversity for future generations.
Yep.
Two, we're building resilience to climate change. Three, we're creating these underwater laboratories for folks like Taylor and other scientists to be able to study these changes, to be able to gain new information and help us advance conservation decisions and what we can be doing to combat climate change. So protecting these areas is incredibly important. President Obama designated this monument in 2016.
So prior to 2016 and that designation by President Obama, was commercial fishing kind of like the state of affairs for years prior to that?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that area had been open to commercial fishing previously. Our understanding is that historically the amount of commercial fishing wasn't great.
Right.
And the reason the original proclamation included language that prohibited commercial fishing is because of the damage that we know commercial fishing can cause on the fragile ecosystems that Taylor was explaining
Gotcha.
earlier.
So President Obama sort of designates this a national monument. No commercial fishing is going to happen there. Then correct me if I'm right in this, because I do want to get this timeline right. Then the first President Trump administration said, no, we're going to reopen it to commercial fishing. Then the Biden administration said, no, we're going to go back to the Obama situation, and we're going to say, no, it's protected. And now the second Trump administration has said, no, we're reopening it for commercial fishing.
Yes, that is exactly right. We're sort of ping-ponging back and forth here. So,
and in that intervening time, has the fishing actually sort of stopped and started, or has this kind of all just been weaving its way through courts and such?
I think we've really been paying attention to the threat that opening these areas to allow for commercial fishing poses, and really focusing on getting those protections back in place. Rolling back these prohibitions on commercial fishing is unlawful, and that's why we have proceeded with this litigation.
Gotcha. Yeah, and we're going to talk about it in a second, but I want to turn back to you, Taylor. I mean, as Jennifer pointed out, one of it seems like perhaps the chief reason why this was initially designated as a protected area by President Obama was the fact that incredible science can be done there. Tell us about some of the science that is being done there. What is the science that's happening there? What is the science that you hope to do there?
Yeah, so the Northeast U.S. canyons and seamounts region is one of the richest deep sea coral habitats in the North Atlantic. So in the past 2 decades, there have been many research expeditions focused on documenting species diversity and distribution, abundance. We now know that there are more than 50 species of deep sea coral in the monument area alone. And the canyon walls allow for the support of these dense coral gardens, even though they're hundreds of thousands of feet below the surface. So it's an incredible space. As I was mentioning, they're dynamic and colorful and diverse, and you wouldn't believe what you could see if you were to descend into one of these canyons. It really looks like a colorful forest.
Yeah. In what ways have you seen in your research that this area has been disturbed by marine debris, human activity? I mean, do you, when you're researching there, do you see the impact of human activity on this incredible space, as you call it?
Yeah, so over the past decade, as we were looking at deep sea coral and sponge habitats, we also made sure to note if we found any kind of evidence of marine debris. And these canyons and seamounts can accumulate large amounts of marine debris. And this comes mostly in the form of plastic bags, fishing gear, metal. And then there are a remaining small percentage of debris that is glass, fabric, wood, cardboard, and other sort of unrecognizable or indistinguishable items.
What's the craziest distinguishable item you found?
I think I'd have to say a toilet.
Really?
Really unfortunate.
Wow.
There's
a metaphor in there somewhere. I'm not sure what it is, but yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Jennifer, going back to the lawsuit, one of the things as I read up on this, it seems like you had just mentioned the idea with this lawsuit is basically, it sounds like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, saying that the way this is being done, the way this rollback is being done is on its face not legal. This is the argument. And I've read a lot about this 1906, I think it is, Antiquities Act. Mm-hmm. So tell us about this lawsuit in particular and why it is that you feel like that this is not illegal, that basically the President Trump administration in this way doesn't have the power to roll back this protection.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Antiquities Act was signed into law by Theodore Roosevelt in 1906.
Yeah.
Yes. And it gave authority to presidents to identify objects of historical importance, historical and prehistorical structures, as well as other items of scientific interest. He gave presidents the authority to be able to designate monuments. What he did not do within the Antiquities Act was to give presidents authority to undo monuments of predecessors. And what I think is really interesting about the Antiquities Act is that it has been used by presidents of both parties since 1906. You mentioned the monuments in the Pacific. George W. Bush designated Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, one of the other marine national monuments that we have in our country. So this is a tool that's been used by presidents of both parties to really recognize and honor places in the United United States that are important to Americans. And as we come up on the 250th anniversary of our country, we should be honoring and protecting our monuments and our marine national monuments, not weakening them.
There are plenty of people who will argue that fishing is crucial to the economy, that it's important to consumers, it's important to people who are fishermen. I mean, what's your take on that in terms of balancing that idea of protection versus something that that is in fact important to a lot of people?
Absolutely, and we would also argue that it is undeniable that commercial fishing is culturally, historically, and economically incredibly important to New England, and we think that there is a way to balance both supporting sustainable fisheries in New England and protecting important ecosystems that we so desperately need to help combat the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis.
Listen to the Curiosity Desk. We're talking with Taylor Hyle and Jennifer Felt about deregulation impacting ocean ecosystems right in our backyard. Jennifer, one last question on the case. Are there updates right now? Where do things stand? What should people be looking out on if they want to follow this?
Right. So as you mentioned, in response to this unlawful rollback, Conservation Law Foundation, together with Natural Resources Defense Council, the Center for Biological Diversity, and Whale Watch naturalist Zach Cliver have filed this lawsuit. And we are waiting on next steps, and we'll be excited to move this forward and fight for protections for this area.
All right. Taylor, I want to finish with you. We said at the beginning, this is a place that most people are never going to see. I would also argue that there's plenty of people who are going to spend exactly zero time thinking about this as well. And yet it's, a place that's something that you spend a lot of time thinking about. I wonder, what would you want to impart on people? What would you want those who don't spend a lot of time thinking about this to know?
Well, I think that it's important that we know that these canyons exist, that they're right here in our backyard. They are our national treasures. They are spectacular and unique, and they deserve to be protected. And one of the most amazing things in general in the deep sea is to witness life in areas of our planet that are unseen, to discover animals that live in the cold and the dark and in places we consider to be extreme because they're unsuitable for human life, and yet they thrive in these ancient and complex ecosystems. And so I think bringing knowledge to these ecosystems is really valuable.
All right. We've been speaking with deep sea ecologist and research associate at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, Taylor Hyle, Conservation Law Foundation Ocean Campaign Management Director, Jennifer Felt, about the reopening of the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monuments. Thank you both for being with us and sharing your expertise here on the Curiosity Desk.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much.
Up next, it's like a real-life Mulan, a woman who disguised herself in order to fight in the American Revolution. That's right, we're getting into some revolutionary local queer history just ahead. This is the Curiosity Desk. Stay with us.
On Boston Common, the Embrace Monument has given the city a new landmark for love, labor, and a longing for freedom. Now, Embrace Boston is moving that conversation indoors, with plans for a Frederick Douglass Civic Center in downtown Crossing, a home for exhibitions, gathering, and education. President and CEO Amari Paris Jeffries joins us to talk about the building, the timing, and what Boston chooses to remember and embrace next. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Cambridge Trust, a division of Eastern Bank, offering business and personal wealth management and private banking services, investing more than $240 million in local communities since 1994. More at cambridgetrust.com. And New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill, a garden destination 50 miles from Boston. Visitors can discover summer with thousands of blooms, twilight experiences, art exhibitions, and educational programs for all ages. nebg.org.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH 89.7. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. Well, it is, of course, Pride Month, which is time for reflecting on some of the watershed moments in queer history. like Stonewall, or Massachusetts legalizing same-sex marriage in 2004. But the road to those big milestones is often paved by people who aren't always recognized or remembered, like a deaf trans woman in East Boston who fought the city and won the right to keep her job, or a Revolutionary War soldier who disguised herself as a man to join the fight. Here to bring some of that hidden history to life for us is Joan Ilacqua. She's an executive director at Queer History Boston. Joan, thanks so much for being with us. Welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to begin with this Revolutionary War soldier who is a woman who disguises herself as a man to fight, which sounds like something mythic and, as we sort of pointed out earlier, out of a Disney cartoon, and yet it happened.
Exactly. So this is Deborah Sampson, who we're talking about. She is a woman who was born in Massachusetts in 1760 in Plimpton. And so she, in 1782, decides to join the army. She comes from this really poor background. And so part of it is a way for her to survive, and part of it is a way for her to join the war effort. She gets involved in the light infantry, which is like a really elite squad. And she does this for about 18 months. So it is very much like a Disney story. She gets injured, and that's how she's found out, but she's honorably discharged at the end of her service.
What do we know? Like, how do we know her story? Like, just how do we know it today?
Yeah, so hers is a fun one because she's relatively well documented.
Yeah.
The further back you go, you find people either with privilege who document themselves in some way, or you find folks who are written about, who are in arrest records or trial records. She wrote a memoir. She worked with Edgar Mann, who was...
Did you say Edgar Mann?
Edgar Mann.
Nice name.
Yeah. He helped her write this really sometimes fictitious memoir talking about how exciting her service was, all of the, everything she went through, what it was like to be a woman in this kind of role. And that helped her to get a pension, which was really what her goal was. She wanted a pension from the military. She becomes the first woman in America to receive one for her service.
So she did receive a pension, yeah.
Yeah, she did. She called on her friend Paul Revere to write a letter.
It's nice to have friends in high places.
Yep. She went on tour with her memoir. She would dress in her uniform and do rifle maneuvers, essentially, to show.
Do we have a sense of what the general I mean, obviously, if she's going on tour with her memoir, this is something that at least some percentage of the population was embracing as like a remarkable story, and we're like all for it. I mean, do we have a sense of how common that was, like for people to be like, this is so cool that this happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know. There are tons of people throughout history who have presented themselves the way they wanted to present themselves, and most of them we don't know about. So there are these few stories that come out where you're like, oh, okay, someone was transgressing societal gender and sexuality norms there.
Yeah.
And that's really what Deborah was doing. I think the way her memoir is shared helps to sort of couch her experience in like, she was doing this for America. She was a good girl.
Totally.
Rather than she was a trans hero of that time.
Right.
But today we can look back and look at her experience and what she went through, and I think be inspired to continue to fight to make the world the way we want it to be.
Is her memoir still available today if somebody wants to read it?
If you, it's in the public domain.
There you go.
So you could go in person to a place like Mass Historical Society, or you could go to the Internet Archive. It's called The Female Review. It has a very long 18th century title.
Yeah.
But essentially The Female
required.
Review.
Yeah,
The Life of Deborah Sampson.
Nice. All right, let's turn our attention to Murray Pickford. Tell us about Murray Pickford.
Yeah, so Murray Pickford is someone that we have learned a lot more about in the last year, and so I want to shout out my archivist, Mick Hamilton, for doing a lot of this research.
I love this, and I think it's also, anytime somebody points out the fact that just because something happened in the past doesn't mean we know everything we're going to know about it. I think it's important to share that. So I love the fact that you're talking about current research that is happening now, that is letting us know about something that happened in the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically, history's cool.
Oh yeah, history's super cool, and we're constantly like rewriting and reinterpreting and learning more, and so you may have learned a lot in elementary school, and that's really great, but there's so much more.
There you go. All right, so keep going.
Yeah, so Murray Pickford, that is her stage name. She's born in about 1905, and she is what we would call a drag queen here in Boston. And so Boston has this reputation during this time period for being very uptight. Have you ever heard of band in Boston?
I have. I was going to say during this time period, or Boston has a reputation over a long period of being a little bit uptight.
The Pilgrims land in 1620. I don't know that we've shaken off the puritanical.
It does take time, so.
We're only 250 years into America. We still have time.
Yeah. But yes, banned in Boston, of course.
Yeah, so Murray Pickford, she is a drag queen. She, at the time, is what's called a female impersonator. The Boston Licensing Board decides in 1947 there can be no female impersonators, no female impersonation performances in cafes or bars. And people were still doing it, though.
Sure.
So in 1949, this order goes out banning female impersonators in all roles in bars. And Murray gets caught in a raid in East Boston, like you mentioned.
Wow.
And so at that time, there's no protections for folks. Your name can end up in the newspaper. You can lose your job. It's a big deal. And Murray, who was this very talented drag queen, was also deaf. And so she took herself to the licensing board and she argued that to take this job away from her would be to take away her entire livelihood. And her argument was very persuasive, and she was given a dispensation to keep performing.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we have a beautiful photo of her in the archives.
Yeah.
With like huge ostrich feathers. And she passes away in 1969. So right as Stonewall is getting going, she's this figure who's really active in the 30s through the 60s.
I'm always struck there are so many, when we talk about, basically like the fight for civil rights, across, across a wider spectrum of people, which is to say like people who are not white men who own land, like in that fight to sort of expand those civil rights across the board, I'm always struck by how important the like single person who says, actually, the way you wrote these laws means you're not allowed to do that. And then they go to court, or they say what you just did is not allowed under the law. And it's such an act of bravery to think of just these individuals saying, no, you know what, this law does extend to me. It's what when I hear a story like this, I'm like, it's just like amazing that you were like, no, you can't do this, and I'm gonna fight for myself.
Yeah, exactly. And like you're saying, there are tons of people in queer history who have done that, who have just stepped forward and said, no, you shouldn't have arrested me. That shouldn't be illegal. Or, yeah, I should be allowed to get married. Let's go. And that's some of the ways that we've made, huge strides in legal protections and rights for queer and trans people in Massachusetts, are those court case moments.
Yeah. You're listening to The Curiosity Desk. We're talking with Joan Ilacqua from Queer History Boston. Tell us the story of Katherine Gergen and Catherine Lee Bates.
All right. So these two women, in their own time, were called the Catherines by their friend group.
Yeah.
They're both women associated with Wellesley College. And Catherine Lee Bates, you may have heard of before. She wrote the lyrics. She wrote the poem that became the lyrics of America the Beautiful.
Yeah, heard of that one.
Yeah. The two Catherines meet in the late 1800s, and they become partners. They are in a relationship with one another for decades. They take care of each other. When they're apart, they're writing letters to one another. They're in what we call a Boston marriage. And so Boston marriages from this time period, late 1800s, they're relationships between two women who have the means to support one another, who don't necessarily have to get married to do what they want to do.
Right.
And so some of these relationships, they may have been good friends. They may have been platonic.
Right.
Others, share a bed for 40 years. And sometimes historians are like, were they roommates?
Is that in the work that historians do, is that sort of stuff, does that make it really difficult to kind of unpack and unpick and like really understand what was happening?
It sometimes does. It's more... It's heading in the direction of being more of a joke than it is a reality. But some folks have a really hard time saying, well, were they lesbians? And I'm like, maybe they were. Let's talk. They were at least partners. Let's talk about them in this
like we can
relationship.
Say the word. It's okay.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation.
The
L
word.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and I don't think it's a bad thing to try to look at these relationships with more nuance. But there's also a higher burden of proof sometimes.
Yeah.
No one assumes the married couple who are together but have no kids are not straight. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, the Catherines, they leave behind a lot of documentation. They leave behind poems and letters, and their friend group include other women who are in these kinds of relationships. And when Catherine Coleman dies. Actually, Catherine Lee Bates writes an entire volume of poetry.
Wow.
So if you want to cry in the archives,
That's-
also in the
that's a
public
good
domain.
cry right there, yeah.
Yeah, Wellesley College has amazing documentation of both of these women and many others from the early days of the college.
So how does that relationship, the Catherine Coleman, Catherine Lee Bates relationship, as an example, especially one where we have good documentation, as you point out, how does that challenge our assumptions about American history when we read it, when we know it, when we understand it?
Yeah, well, I think one thing I like to shock folks with is, did you know America the Beautiful was written by a lesbian?
Yeah.
It was right there, right in front of you the whole time. I think that sometimes we assume or think that these things that are just part of our everyday life.
Yeah.
We don't think about the people behind them. And I think there's a lot of power in thinking about, she wrote this beautiful poem. What else did she do in her life? How
Yeah.
else did she, again, make the world what she wanted it to be? And she did that by having a female partner and going on long trips and writing poetry. And yeah.
And also, I mean, I think in particular, when you talk about something like America the Beautiful, which is something, that most people know, I think it's also important to go like, and this person who, you may look at and think is sort of an other type of person, they can be patriotic too, just like you,
Oh, yeah. That's as we're, my organization is, gearing up for the 250th, as many of us are. We've been really paying attention to and trying to draw attention to figures like this who are part of our history, who might already be known in some way, and highlighting, the fullness and richness of their life. And what it meant to continue fighting for the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, if you were anyone but a white landowning man at the time.
Yeah. You're listening to the Curiosity Desk. We're talking about queer history in Boston with Joan Ilacqua from Queer History Boston. Before I let you go, I want to get one more in. Let's talk about Prescott Townsend.
Oh, yeah. Prescott Townsend. He is
Everybody's names are great. All of these people, these are just great names.
Aren't they wonderful?
Yeah.
I'm like, it's a D&D campaign waiting to happen. Deep cut for my nerd friends.
Awesome.
But so Prescott Townsend, he's a Boston Brahmin. He's from a very affluent, privileged family. He descends from like a dozen people who are on
What
the
time period
Mayflower.
are we talking about here?
He's born late 1800s. So he, goes to Harvard in the early 1900s. By the 20s, he's a young man and known for being a patron of the arts in Provincetown, which sounds like a euphemism or something, but literally he was
right. He was a patron of the arts in Provincetown. That was not a Boston marriage type term.
No.
Yeah.
He was literally supporting theater at the time. But so we get to World War II, actually, the 1940s, and he's relatively out. He supposedly is going to the State House and petitioning for laws against same-sex relationships from the Puritan era to be taken off the books.
Wow.
There's little documentation about that. But he gets caught. He gets arrested. He gets caught in the act with another man. He gets arrested. He refuses to pay a fine, and he goes to jail for 18 months on Deer Island.
18 months?
Yeah. And so after that, yeah, he's stricken from the social register. Like literally, his name is crossed out, and he becomes an activist. He spends the rest of his life, really, organizing gay men. He supposedly paid for the flyers that announced the first Pride in Boston in 1971, and so, yeah, he's another one of these figures who. He's not going to be the first name in the textbook, but he's it's another person who, before there was such public visibility for the community, is coming forward and saying, no, this isn't how it should be, and fighting to make it different.
Yeah. Before I let you go, tell us a little bit, for folks who don't know, about that first Pride in 1971 here in Boston.
Yeah, so Pride celebrates the anniversary of the Stonewall Riots. So that's 1969. 1970, Boston has a teach-in, so a series of events and conversations about, gender and sexuality. 71, we have a march. It's not sanctioned by the city. It's a couple hundred people, and folks are reading lists of demands that range from cleanliness and safety inside of gay bars to not being harassed by police to laws from the 1600s being taken off the books.
Yeah.
And then they have a rally at the end of it. And so we've celebrated Pride in some way or another every year since.
It's amazing. Joan, you're going to be back at GBH in July for an event. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so we have been working on a podcast called Queer Boston's Pursuit of Happiness with funding from Mass Humanities. And so together we will be launching a documentary about the Expand Massachusetts Stories grant program, along with a couple other folks. And I believe the date is July 14th, but everyone's going to double check that for me.
That's fine. We have the internet. we can work out the details. All right.
Beautiful.
We've been speaking with Joan Ilacqua, the executive director of Queer History Boston. For more, check out queerhistoryboston.org. Thank you so much, Joan, for being with us today. When we return, perfect pitch. Is it a myth? Now, we're not talking about the musical kind. We're about to get really nerdy about World Cup grass. I'm Edgar III. This is the Curiosity Desk. Don't go anywhere.
Firefighters are anticipating a busy summer in the West. The U.S. Forest Service says it is ahead of its hiring goals, but some Westerners are worried by downsizing at the agency.
These layoffs at the federal level are presenting risk as to our ability to respond to major wildfires.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. Concerns over wildfire staffing on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Newport Mansions, presenting 11 historic properties and landscapes, including 7 national historic landmarks, tracing America's architectural and social development from the colonial era through the Gilded Age. NewportMansions.org. And Mass General Brigham. In heart surgery, expertise matters. Mass General Brigham Heart and Vascular Institute performs thousands of surgeries each year and is committed to research and innovation. MassGeneralBrigham.org/heart.
You are listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH 89.7. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We're streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. So, not sure if you have noticed, but the World Cup is underway, and it's brought about a lot of conversation around here. That conversation has mostly been about how much the Scots love to drink. But something that is a point of focus and incredibly important that we're not talking about as much: the grass the games are being played on. FIFA has a long-standing rule that World Cup games are never, ever played on artificial turf. That means that several host stadiums across the U.S. had to switch over to real grass in time for the games. Why does the grass matter that much? And what goes into growing the perfect stadium terrain? Well, here to shed some light on that is the guy who has been working for years, on perfecting the World Cup pitches at the tournament's 16 venues in North America. Trey Rogers is a professor of turf grass management at Michigan State University. Trey, welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Never a World Cup match on artificial turf which is a pretty big deal. Why is this so important, FIFA? Do you have a sense?
Well, I think the players have a preference of playing on natural grass, so that probably we could start right there. And I feel like they feel they can control the ball a little bit better on natural grass, and so. And if you go to Europe or you go to South America, you go to any of these places and you look at any of those big stadiums, there's never anything but grass, maybe a little bit up in the Scandinavian countries. And so it's just been very easy for them to say, we'll stay on natural grass. And the truth of the matter is they only really have any trouble when they come to the United States. The rest of the world, their soccer stadiums and their natural grass to begin with. So, we had this same issue back in 1994 when they came, and that's when we put the portable field in for the Pontiac Silverdome. Also, interestingly, the Giants had to put in a portable field or a temporary field back in 94. And so, here we are again in 2026, and there's been 8 of them out of the 16 stadiums.
Yeah. When you, as a turf grass management guy, when you first heard that the U.S. and North America in general is going to have World Cup coming in 2026, did you start licking your chops? Were you like, oh man, I'm getting in there. We're going to get some good grass together?
Well, I guess I kind of found out about it in 2019. Ironically, somebody called me from Montreal, of all places, because they said, hey, did you know North America is going to get the bid for the World Cup? And I said, no, I really hadn't been paying much attention to it. And he said, would you mind coming out and looking at this stadium and seeing if what do you think of it? So I went out there, and right after that, my former graduate student, John Sorokin, called me and he said, hey, I've been talking with FIFA. They're going to want us to do a lot of research and a lot of help on this, and will you help? And I said, sure, I'll help. This is too big a thing to pass up, and obviously been working on it for whatever that is, 5 or 6 years now.
You listen to the Curiosity Desk. We're talking with turfgrass expert Trey Rogers about what goes into creating the perfect pitch for a World Cup game. So what have you been doing over these 6 years? What's your role been in developing these grass fields?
I've had the role of a scientist. I've had the role of a psychiatrist. I've had the role of all of them. And, whether
accountant.
And you laugh at that, but if you were a graduate student on this project, this was a very difficult project. Why? Because it had a time constraint. There's a kickoff. There's a need. We need this information now. There is no excuse. You can't say to me, our experiment failed. We'll come back in 6 months from now. It didn't work that way. So there's a lot of people and they did great. Graduate students did great. This was at Michigan State. This was at the University of Tennessee. All of them did a fantastic job, but they were under some pressure for sure.
Tell us a little bit about the science, the innovation that goes into something like this, because I feel like there's some portion of the population that's just going to kind of squint their eyes a bit and go like, well, I don't know, it's just grass. Like, how hard can it be to grow grass and just put it, you just put some grass on the dirt and mow it and you're fine. You're ready to go.
I don't disagree. It is just grass. I mean, and that is the same thing. It's pretty amazing to sit there and tell somebody that the grass that's in their yard is the same grass that's in Boston, or the same grass that's in New York or wherever. It's just the intensity at which it's being maintained. And the other thing that's big is we knew we needed to come up with a way to establish this grass very quickly. And we needed to know that it was going to establish very heartily and very quickly. And that was by putting it on plastic. We grew it at a sod farm, establishing it on a big sheet of plastic. And I think the easiest way to get a listener to understand this is to think literally about a plant in a pot.
Okay.
And so when a plant's in a pot, the roots grow, and then when they hit the edge of the pot, what do? They just start swirling around. And when you pull that pot up, you've got a plant that you feel like you could throw against the wall and it wouldn't break because those roots are so strong. And that's really the idea behind sod on plastic. We lay out about an inch of sand or so, and then we seed into it, and those grass seeds germinate. They go down through through the root zone, through the soil, hit that plastic, start growing laterally, start making that very strong system. Now, once that strong system's ready to go, we pick it up, you roll it up literally like you would think about a piece of pizza rolling up off the plastic. Obviously, you cut it and you do the things that are necessary to roll it. But the beauty of that is now you've got a plant that is under no physiological shock. Any of our listeners out there, if they've ever had the yard sodded, they know that the person who is in charge screamed at them, you better water this every day for the next 2 weeks or it's going to die. That's not sod on plastic and that's not any type of that situation, because the plant's under no physiological stress. We didn't cut its root system off. It's still fully intact. That allows it to ship nicely. That allows it to set up nicely. That allows it to put us into these temporary fields at the last minute, which was done. And it's one of the reasons why you've been watching these games and thinking, man, this grass looks pretty good. Now, this wasn't anything that we invented. Probably if you want to say, what did you come up with? We came up with the formula of grasses, a mixture of cool season grasses that we gave to the sod farms. The sod farms took over. They did what they do. And they delivered, some world-class grass and then put it into the hands of world-class field managers who have now gone to work providing world-class conditions for a world-class event.
Well, now you point out, you point out the sort of formula, as you say. I mean, those of us watching the World Cup, I think we understand as you watch these games, they are happening in a variety of different climates, right? The stadium here in Boston versus the stadium in Mexico City versus the stadium in, the stadiums in Canada. Versus the stadium in Los Angeles, like these are all very different climates. So is this the same grass that is across the board in all of these places, or are there bespoke solutions here?
So we got two major types. We got a warm season grass, which is going to go into the warmer climates, and then we have cool season grass. So grass like in Boston would have the cool season grass, Toronto cool season grass. Warm season grass would be in Monterey. It would be in Guadalajara, Kansas City, and this is the Bermuda grass, Miami. Interestingly, the 5 dome stadiums, they all have the cool season grass. And that kind of blows people's mind to think about Houston,
right.
Texas.
Because they're climate controlled.
That's right. That's right. Climate controlled and the light situation. And these were things that we had to come up with. We had to come up with this and make this suggestion to FIFA and then prove this over our, over the years through our research. And, FIFA obviously supported this work, and it's been great that they did this. And this is going to help athletic fields. We'll have that trickle down theory, whatever that we had back in the 90s after we did the Pontiac Silverdome. There's a lot of athletic fields that really benefited from this. So it's cool.
We're talking with Trey Rogers. He's a professor of turfgrass management at Michigan State University. We're talking about the grass that the World Cup is being played on in stadiums, all over North America. Trey, there's been some, Brazil and France's players and managers have done some criticizing of the pitch at MetLife Stadium. The Norway coach had some things to say about how dry the Boston Stadium turf was. When you hear this stuff, I mean, do you just sort of go like, well, it's kind of gamesmanship and par for the course, or is it something that you take seriously and say, okay, we got to figure something out here?
Well, it's not really been my role. My role is not in that area. And so, that is something that the field manager and FIFA are actually responding to, and they're doing a nice job of it.
Gotcha. Where do you grow the grass? Like, I mean, it's a fair amount of grass that you're talking about. Where do you grow it, and how do you transport it?
Well, interestingly, it gets grown at the sod farms, and there were 9 of them across North America, 2 in Canada, 1 in Mexico. The rest were in the United States, and some of them we had to ship it a long ways. I mean, and again, you think about Houston or Dallas or Atlanta, we grew a cool season grass in Denver, Colorado, put it in refrigerated trucks and shipped it across. And again, if this plant isn't in that sod-on plastic, if it isn't in that box, so to speak, in that container, and literally, it doesn't transfer very well. And so, this is not new. This is a system. This sod-on plastic's been around for about 30 years. We used it for the Pontiac Silverdome project. And you probably haven't seen a Super Bowl in the last 15 years that wasn't grown on plastic if it was natural grass. Just not been as widespread and used to solve all these different solutions at the same time like we're doing.
Well, I mean, you talk about the trickle-down effect. I mean, certainly, when we think about, sport being played on grass and turf, the NFL is obviously what comes to mind here. Do you think that, is there a chance that, the trickle-down here will be some NFL teams that are currently not playing on natural grass to say, actually, maybe we could here at this stadium transition off of artificial turf and into natural grass? Certainly that's something it sounds like the Players Association in the NFL would be behind.
I think everybody's watching that. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think that, do I think it could be done? Yes, I do think it could be done. Do I think it would require commitment, particularly in a multi-use stadium? Yes. What does that commitment mean? That commitment is no different than me saying to you, let's commit to getting ready to run a marathon.
Yeah.
Okay, it can be done, but you're going to have to commit to it. And that means if there's something that goes wrong, you can't throw your hands up and say, see, it failed. So we're not quite there as far as, just being able to snap our fingers, but I don't think we're very far away either.
Interesting. You talk about commitment being kind of the most important thing. One of the things I think people go through in their heads when they're going to make a commitment is they say, "All right, well, I thought through everything. Do I have a backup plan?" When it comes to this, like, are these the way that this sort of plan for the stadium turfs for the World Cup goes? Is there like backup turf? Do you switch it out at any point, or is it like it gets installed once and we're pretty sure that that's going to last the length of the tournament for these stadiums?
Our research would suggest that we don't need to take this out. Okay, we don't believe we will have to. However, it's a living plant. Things can happen to anything that's alive. Subsequently, you have to have backup plans. And it'd be ludicrous for me to say to you, we don't have any grass sitting somewhere. Of course we do. Of course we do. Of course we do. It's the biggest event in the world. You got to.
Yeah. How did you get into this work? I mean, did you just, like, when you were a child, were you like, you know what I love? Grass. I want to know everything about grass. I want to learn everything there is to know about grass.
My mother would roll over in her grave right now if that was the case, because I hated mowing the yard when I was a little kid.
No kidding. No, you did not. Really?
Yes, oh yeah. But I love golf. And when I became later on in my teenage years, I got a job on a golf course, and that just kind of really made me realize that this could be a pretty fun career. And of course, I was getting paid to mow the yard at that point.
Sure.
But that's really where it took me, and got a bachelor's degree, master's degree, then a PhD at Penn State. And it's really helped me here at Michigan State, because I know that most people that get into the area of turf grass management do so because they caught on to a summer job somewhere and it lit a fire under them, because it is a place where a perfectionist can toil and never get bored. It really is.
Do you like that part of it? Do you like that sort of unachievable perfection, that sort of ever present quest, knowing you're never going to perfect it?
I like that a lot. And I love the students that like to chase that as well. I'm 67 years old, no plans to retire, because I really like what I do. And classroom is one of my favorite spots, with the exception of a golf course.
When you're not working with grad students, as you point out, to like get ready for something as huge as the World Cup, what do you do? What is the job? What's the work?
Well, like I said, I'm a professor there, so I have a pretty heavy teaching appointment. So I have anywhere from 25 to 40 students in 4 classes a year that all want to be either golf course superintendents or athletic field managers. As a matter of fact, one of our students, Eli Delaney, is doing an internship for Ryan Bjorn there in Boston at your stadium this summer, getting a great experience because he wants to be an athletic field manager. So I spend a lot of time, and this is in the undergrad level, teaching students that this is what they want to do for a living. So you got the undergrad teaching, you got the grad student research, and then you have your own research. And before I know it, 38 years at Michigan State has gone by like a snap.
Yeah. What kinds of things are like, when it comes to the research stuff, like what is the next thing that folks are chasing? What's the new thing to learn in this field?
I think there's a couple of things, but one of them is the autonomy, right? And so you're going to watch autonomous mowers really jump onto the game. And I think this could really help athletic fields. I mean, a number of people that I've talked to in the northeastern part of the United States that didn't necessarily want to have their games being played on artificial turf, but the school systems didn't have the budgets to take care of natural turf, and grass dies when it gets abused. But all of a sudden, if you don't have to spend a lot of money putting a person's butt in a seat to mow the yard, to mow the grass, to mow the turf, and you can actually mow many times a week as you're necessary with a robot, it changes the game. So there's one thing, and that's a lot of research that's being done by researchers at UMass and University of Connecticut. So that's one thing that I think's big. I think the other thing that is going to come onto the scene is just the big data, and it's the same type of thing. And so some of this stuff like satellites, getting a satellite image of your athletic fields. And so maybe now, instead of being able to see one athletic field, maybe you could see every athletic field in the state of Massachusetts if you were sitting at a desk and be able to point out where an area was wrong or right. That changes the game a lot.
Fascinating stuff. We've been speaking with Trey Rogers, professor of turfgrass management at Michigan State University, and one of the people making sure that all of the soccer players have a place to play during the World Cup. Thank you so much for your time, Trey.
You're very welcome.
And Jared Bowen's with me. So, Jared, how has your World Cup been so far?
Oh, I have had so much fun being around this. And you know what I did this weekend is go around taking pictures of all the orange traffic cones and all the pieces of public
So
art
good.
that I'm seeing in them in an entirely different, joyous light.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. What do you got on the show today?
So we're talking to Amari Paris-Jeffries, president and CEO of Embrace Boston. They have a new building that they have just announced. So they're taking their civic engagement indoors because, of course, they're the people behind the monument, the Embrace Monument on Boston Common. It's now expanding much beyond that. We'll talk to the Boston Athenaeum about Imagined Nation, an exhibition looking at 250 from their own collection, including something you and I have both talked about in the past, George Washington's library, housed right there. And then Lloyd Dobler, you know who I'm talking about.
I do.
Say Anything.
Yeah.
There's an actor and writer, Dennis Traynor Jr., who is looking at Lloyd Dobler in his 50s and what a Gen Xer might look like Lloyd Dobbs might look at the world today, how he might look at the world today.
Fascinating.
He's taking it to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, so we get a sneak peek.
Excellent stuff. That is Jared Bowen and the Culture Show coming your way in just about a minute and a half. As for us, that about does it for now. Thanks to the Curiosity Deck's production crew and all the folks here at GBH who made today's show possible. We'll be right back here in 23 short hours. If you can't wait that long, check out the podcast. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Stay curious out there.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show. Next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Subaru of New England. The all-wheel drive 2026 Subaru Outback is designed for summer adventures. Subaru retailer locations at SubaruofNewEngland.com. The next Independent Lens showcases an exhibit about the global evolution of Vogue that honors Black and queer resistance and calls for a more liberated future. Don't miss Assembly tonight at 10 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, on Boston Common, the Embrace Monument has given the city a landmark for love and an undying reach for civil rights. Now Embrace Boston is moving that conversation indoors and into daily civic life, with plans for a Frederick Douglass Civic Center in downtown Crossing. It'll be a home for gathering, education, and public history. Amari Paris-Jeffries, president and CEO of Embrace Boston, joins us to talk about the building, the timing, and what Boston chooses to embrace next. From there, the revolution after the revolution. At the Boston Athenaeum, the new exhibition Imagined Nation moves from treasures held by George Washington and the work of early poet Phyllis Wheatley to examinations of modern society by artists like Alan Rohan Crate. They're the objects to which Americans return to as we've argued over freedom, memory, and belonging. And remember Lloyd Dobler, the boombox-toting romantic from Cameron Crowe's 1999 film Say Anything? In his new one-man show, The Tao of Lloyd, actor and writer Dennis Traynor Jr. imagines the iconic character decades later, older, grayer, and still refusing to sell out, even as Gen X idealism collides with political collapse, cultural burnout, and late-stage everything. That's all right now on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show on 89.7 and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. We begin the show with our recurring feature, AI Actual Intelligence, where we tap into the most interesting thinkers in our region for their original and algorithm-free insights and observations. We're joined now by Imari Paris-Jeffries, President and CEO of Embrace Boston and one of the co-chairs of Everyone 250. He joins us every month and has some big expansion news to share. Imari, welcome back. Great to see you.
Great seeing you. Bum, 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 those horns.
Yeah, I'm trying to mask the fact that this was a surprise to me, too. I think people who listen know I don't like surprises. I always like to know the information beforehand.
I've been dying to tell you, but I've been getting the evil eye of not spilling the beans. Like every time I've been in here, we've been negotiating and working on this. And it's some of the same crew, Mass Design Group, and, Hank Willis Thomas is involved in this.
Well, before we get into it, we should explain you've bought 2 buildings within seeing distance of the Embrace.
180 steps. I walked it many times, and it's not giant steps. It's regular people steps away from the Embrace, and it's luck. These buildings weren't for sale, and we got some support by one of our supporters to look for something downtown, and the agents found these properties that were in proximity to the Embrace, and the owners were interested. We wanted to have something that had tenants but could be convertible to cultural space. There's going to be a black box theater. There's going to be a gallery there, a gift shop, museum. One of my favorite places, in the Seaport. I love the ICA's gift shop. If you took that out and put it on Newberry Street or any other place, I would go in there and buy all the little things in there, the books.
You've come to the right place. I also love museum gift shops so much.
Yeah, it's not just the things that are in there to recreate the installations, the exhibitions. It's like the little one of a kind items in there, and to have something like that, and there are gift shops around the Boston Common and the Embrace, but just something different, and we want to have that type of cultural space near the Common.
But this is exactly what you're talking about. So I say seeing distance, but you have to basically walk out on the sidewalk a little bit, and then you're right there. So you'll have this headquarters, in a sense, a civic center, Frederick Douglass Civic Center, essentially. Space, as you mentioned, the theater, the Black Box Theater gallery space, this is going to be a hub for you.
Yeah, and it's part of our next big monument project. And you remember during the pandemic and the racial reckoning and the economic crisis of the 2020s, the Embrace served as a monument that united people, and this is the next monument project. And so if you've been to the ICA and the Derek Adams installation, so the facade of these 2 buildings will be designed in the images of Frederick Douglass. We'll pull together an art commission, a national call for artists to redesign the facades of these buildings in the images of Frederick Douglass, whatever that means to people, and we'll have the community vote. And we're also talking to the city about the Emancipation Plinth. And so if you remember, Douglass spoke at the the Freedmen's Monument in D.C. And so we had a copy of that, a sister monument in Park Square, where it was removed in 2020. And so the Emancipation Plinth will be a part of this larger project. Douglass spoke at it. He said it didn't quite represent emancipation. And so this larger project, the Frederick Douglass Monument, the facade of our buildings, the Emancipation Plinth, maybe it'll be 1 artist, maybe it'll be 2 artists, and we hope to unveil it by Boston's 400th, which is in 2030.
You continue, and this is why you're on the show every month, you continue to have the arts at the core of what you're doing. And it's not just surface, not that it has to be just, but as we mentioned, internally as well. There's a theater space and gallery space. Theater space is really hard to come by in this city for so many groups, but how have you recognized that the arts need to be at the core of this space as well?
Well, you and I talk about this all the time. Art and culture is how we communicate, is how we sense make. And, there are limited spaces for smaller, mezzanine, middle-sized cultural companies to have spaces to call their own. And hopefully in a couple of weeks, I'll be announcing we're in negotiation with a couple of companies that I know that you know, and you go to them. We all both go to them, which will call the new place their home. Their home. We've been working with them behind the scenes. I'm excited. And so there might be one, maybe two. This will be their permanent home. And so it's so exciting. You know, there's going to be another museum, a Holocaust museum that's being established there. And so Downtown Crossing is starting to emerge as a new cultural hub. People are starting to come back. And I think having this new place as an anchor tenant in the area and bringing what Embrace knows how to do is monuments, memorial, and you know, our stone soup approach to the work. It's like who else, what else can be included. You know, we'll do that in this process.
I know you're just at the beginning because you're just announcing the purchase. I'm kind of laughing because I want to know who the theater companies are. I want to say one of them out loud. I'm sure I know
you
who
probably
it is.
know. You probably know.
But anyway, I'm going to continue. I'm going to behave myself today. I don't know why. But is there a timeline for the opening of the building, and how do you see that playing out?
Well, you know, it can be used now. You know, it looks like we call it mid 2000s nonprofit chic. It doesn't look cute, but it's usable, and so I think some of the companies might use it now. It's able to be engaged. It is tenanted. There are other tenants in the building. It is an 8-story building and a 5-story building, but the cultural space is available now, and I think some of the companies will start using it. If there are other organizations, other nonprofits, other cultural spaces that want to use it, want to do small scale installations inside of it, we want it to be used while we're developing and raising money. If you go to our website, we have some renderings of what it will look like. We're partnering with our great friends, Mass Design Group, who, as people know, developed the plaza, the 1965 Freedom Plaza of the Embrace, and many, many other spaces and places across the country and the world. And so, most
notably, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, which is a masterpiece.
That's right. And so we're partnering with them, and so they've created some amazing renderings, and you could check it out online.
Well, I love hearing that too, and I'll point out for our audience that does not usually happen. That you purchase and right away it's available for use, so that's extraordinary too. I want to ask you, because we've talked about this so much, and this intersects with your world, about the removal of historical facts when it comes to banners and placards and wall text in museums. This was very significant because it happened here. There was a request for removal of references to the suffragists, to enslavement, and more at the Bunker Hill Memorial right here in Boston, also in Lowell and other parts of the country. As we were discussing with Noel Trent last week, this has been reversed by a judge here in Boston, a federal judge. How do you see, what's the signal that this sends, that this thing that has concerned so many people about the erasure of history when we're talking about fact is not happening anymore?
Yeah, I think this is, another subject that you and I have been talking about every time we're on here. Public art is how we tell stories, and they function as, at Embrace, we call them analog cookies, in the same way that digital cookies work in the background, whether people realize it or not, telling stories. And public art does the same. And, we're in this moment where we're celebrating our country's 250th. And what makes it great is that we learn from our mistakes. We don't hide them. And we learn from every single contribution that every single culture, ethnicity, race, group that has arrived in the United States has contributed. And we want to tell those stories. And the public spaces, our parks, are the new lunch counters, and that's where the struggle has taken place, and we've seen that time and time again, especially now. And that's where Embrace has concerned itself in the public sphere, and as a part of the 250, by the end of this year, we will have, in partnership with the city and the state, Mass 250, Boston 250, we will have installed 20 markers on under-recognized places and spaces, telling more robust stories, more inclusive stories. And so we know the importance of this. We understand what's at stake, and this is confirmation that the work that we are doing is the right work, because they are taking it down, and we're very thankful that this is put on pause.
What does it mean to you? I remember asking this of Noelle Trent last year, of course, head of the African American History Museum as well, that you don't want people to become complacent because this is moving forward, but does this signal to you something greater, or is it always at risk?
It is always at risk. Monuments have always been part of propaganda, part of control, part of narrative building. And you've seen many of the Confederate monuments emerge at times when liberties, civil liberties for all sorts of groups have emerged in throughout history. And we can't take it for granted that while we're simultaneously fighting for laws and legislation, that the role of art and culture flow hand in hand. And so us as artists and culture leaders and creatives have to work side by side with legislators and lawmakers and activists. Democracy takes both parts of our left brain and right brain, and we work side by side. Artists have always been at the forefront. Writers have always been at the forefront of pushing the agenda, telling the story, and reflecting back on society. And so we can't take it for granted. Our role is as storytellers. Journalists are a part of that, reflecting back what's happening, telling the stories to communities. And we've seen this administration attack all of those things, all of the tools of sense-making and meaning-making.
I'm speaking with Amari Parris-Jeffries, President and CEO of Embrace Boston. He joins us every month. The perfect segue, what you were just talking about, into what I want to ask you now is because I think as I look around and I see people acting and I see people talking, people believe that we are living in a certain reality now. And I think that the Scots running around Boston, and I mean this in all seriousness, just changed our notion of what life can be, how life can be enjoyed, how life can be experienced, how somebody else sees our own hometown and our own home state. What have you recognized in the joy that the Scottish people have brought us in the way they've interacted here?
Yeah, it has been refreshing to not only experience the World Cup on social media, but in real life, and not just in Boston, but in other cities where you've seen the reaction of visitors in other cities, and including down south, of their perception of what America is from what's been portrayed externally, and their experiences when they actually arrived, and who we are. And it's funny, I don't know if this is true, that their perceptions of Mexico and the United States have been welcoming and loving, and their perception of Canada, which is supposed to be way more friendlier than the United States, and Mexico is they're less friendly than both of us. And so, but Mexico and the United States have been the most friendly and have demonstrated the most hospitality. And so I think what it has proven is that we are more alike than we are different. I had the opportunity, thank God, got invited to my very first soccer game. It was Morocco and Scotland, and it was remarkable. And someone who is familiar with football, soccer, said that, even after the game, throughout the game, you would never have seen these two clubs and these two groups of people in another place celebrate and party. And, Morocco won, but after the game, they were exchanging headgear and paraphernalia and scarves and dancing together. And you could feel the joy. And then, throughout the city, locals and visitors have been able to participate. The power of gathering, and the city has done such a great job of creating gathering spots and really pulling people together in this moment. I mean, I've just been really impressed. I mean, it's been such a tough time in our country. And we've needed this. We've needed this.
This is what I find so fascinating, because if you think about the psychology of it, I think there are a lot of people who thought those days are over. The days of fun, the days of just being amused by, as I was all weekend long, as I was walking around the city and seeing traffic cones on statues, which ordinarily you might think they're defacing them, but then you realize there's really respectful intent and homage paying happening when they're putting the traffic cones on sculptures, or to understand how much they're joyfully drinking. This isn't about binge drinking and drunken behavior, but people are having fun in bars. And then the great story in the Globe, I think it was yesterday or today, about how they're helping the cleanup crews in Boston Common pick up after themselves. And this is eye-opening for us.
And there was even a cone on the Embrace. I was
oh really? I missed that one.
Yeah, when I saw the cones on the other statues, I was like, oh, they won't put one on the Embrace. And there was one on the Embrace too, and someone sent me the picture. They figured out how to put a cone on the Embrace. It was remarkable, and so every monument that I guess could get a cone on it had a cone on it. And to boot, Embrace is a part of a group of a coalition of other organizations, the Partnership, the Urban League, the NAACP. It's Juneteenth weekend, and I tell you, the Juneteenth weekend in Franklin Park was tremendous. It felt like the biggest one ever, and the love and the joy there. And so the World Cup Juneteenth weekend, there were so many activities. It felt phenomenal. It felt phenomenal this weekend. I think our city needed this, needed the type of love and joy and fellowship amongst each other. And there were Scottish people that showed up to Franklin Park Juneteenth, and they were welcomed. And I saw some kilts walking around Juneteenth, and I was like, wow. This is fantastic.
Which means they sought you out. Well, we try to sometimes, whenever appropriate, bring it back to Martin Luther King, because of course the Embrace statue. But this is exactly what he talked about.
This is the beloved community.
The beloved community, yeah.
This is it. And this is what we want to see. And just talking to people who are not from here, and you see the type of pride, and that's what makes America America. You can be from here. You could be a U.S. citizen and be of other ethnicity, and both root for the United States and root for another team, depending on who's playing. And it's a win-win, right? And so, I got to root for Morocco, Scotland, and the United States in the same day. And then the day before, I got to root for Mexico. And so it was like, man, this is fantastic. And I went to East Boston and Tall Ships, and it was it was sold out. It was fantastic. It was great for our city. They extended the opening and select bars, and so you're right. It isn't just a slosh fest where people are just walking around just drinking for drinking's sake. I think it is really about libation, fun, fellowship. People, and it's helping businesses. It's getting together. It's creating the type of connectivity that I think our city, Boston, is known for. It's been a great opportunity.
Well, it's certainly infectious. I'll say that, as I've been walking around, running around, and seeing this around you. Now our task is to hold on to it.
That's right.
And remember that we can carry it on even after they've all gone home. Mari Parrish Jeffries, thank you so much for being here as always. Congratulations on the new building, and we'll talk about your forthcoming resident theater companies in the near future, I have no doubt. Mari Parrish Jeffries is president and CEO of Embrace Boston and one of the co-chairs of Everyone 250. He joins us every month. Well, coming up, the Boston Athenaeum has a new exhibition related to the country's 250th anniversary, including treasures from George Washington's own library. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Firefighters are anticipating a busy summer in the West. The U.S. Forest Service says it is ahead of its hiring goals, but some Westerners are worried by downsizing at the agency.
These layoffs at the federal level are presenting risk as to our ability to respond to major wildfires.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. Concerns over wildfire staffing on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Revolve Dance Project, presenting Revolutions, a celebration of live music and dance with original compositions and choreography. Sunday, June 28th at 2 and 6 at the Strand Theater in Providence. Ticket info at revolvedanceproject.com. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, providing helpful digital tools, world-class providers, and coverage that help you live in the moment. More at massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org. And the University of Rhode Island's College of Business with an online Master's of Science in Supply Chain Management designed to prepare students to develop resilient and flexible supply chain strategies. uri.edu/MS Supply Chain.
The GBH News app is your daily home for essential local news. The stories you actually need to know without distractions or noise or paywalls. Download the GBH News app today on the App Store or Google Play.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show, live on 89.7 and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. The American Revolution is often told through its defining scenes: resistance to British rule, the fight for independence, and the debate over how exactly the new republic would be structured. It's a history shaped by political ideals, military conflict, and figures with a lot of audacity. A new exhibition titled Imagined Nation at the Boston Athenaeum looks at that history as something even more layered and continuous. It considers how ideas of nationhood were formed, recorded, and reinterpreted through books, maps, and images, and how later generations continue to question what America is and who it was meant to include. Imagined Nation is on view through November 14th at the Boston Athenaeum. Reed Gotchberg is the curator, and she joins us to talk about it all. Welcome to The Culture Show. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dad, for having me.
Well, I wonder how you thought about the show you would do, because as people are hearing on this show and visiting museums, they realize there are so many entry points into this moment and looking back at 250 years of history in this country, especially in this region, given our place in all that history. How did you arrive at this concept?
That's such a great question. I have found, in terms of thinking about this exhibition, that it was really grounded in the Athenaeum's collections. This is really a story told by and through the art and print culture that is part of the Athenaeum's collection. And I think from the beginning, this idea of how Americans have been envisioning the nation and its future, really through those different media, has been so core to how we have been thinking about that story and our own spin on it through the collections at the Athenaeum.
Well, I think we should probably back up a little bit. And for people who haven't visited the Athenaeum and who don't understand why it might have so much of our history within its archives and collections, what is it and what has it been about?
So the Athenaeum was established in 1807, and it has functioned as a library and museum and cultural center for, over 2 centuries. And these collections have been acquired and have grown over that time. One of the featured collections in Imagined Nation is George Washington's library, which came to the Athenaeum in 1848 through a subscription campaign that was led by Bostonians in order to bring a portion of the first president's library to Boston.
Which is, I have to say, every time I hear it, I know this, it's bonkers to think about that George Washington's library was essentially up for sale.
Exactly. It was up for sale. And the dealer, who was based in Vermont, also had ties to the British Museum, to other institutions. And so there was a lot of fear in the 1840s that Washington's library might end up in London, and we couldn't have that. And so it came to Boston, where, it has been part of the Athenaeum's collection since, 1848. And it continues, I think, to play a really important role in terms of our larger American history collections, because it offers this, really incredible glimpse of how Washington is reading about and engaging with so many of the central topics of his day. I mean, he's reading books for military strategy. There are, essentially how-to manuals for his leadership of the Continental Army. He's reading about agriculture, but he's also reading debates about slavery. He's reading treaties with indigenous communities. He's, engaged with the arts and culture. And so I think it offers not only this very vivid picture of Washington himself, but also this sense of the 18th century more broadly. You can get a sense of all of these different topics that are kind of crossing paths and intersecting and connecting with each other, and the different kinds of ideas that are informing how people like Washington, but also Americans more broadly, are thinking about the nation and its possibilities at this point in time.
I've never thought to ask this, but is he somebody who annotated the books as he read them?
Sadly, not much.
No.
He did write his name on the title page or the front pages of some books, but unfortunately for me, he did not annotate too often. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson are well known for annotating and, getting into arguments in the margins with the people that they're reading. But Washington, that wasn't really his style.
Very passive, very respectful, perhaps.
Exactly.
So what of his library have you brought to the fore in your exhibition, Imagined Nation?
Yeah, so we are really featuring the range of topics that Washington was exploring in his lifetime and trying to kind of give a sense of those larger questions around agriculture, military, geography. We are featuring his copy of Common Sense by Thomas Paine. He had a copy of the very first printing from January of 1776. He wrote his name in it twice. I don't know if that means anything in particular, but it gives you a sense of how he was very aware of how much this pamphlet was going to shape debates about American independence and politics in 1776 on the eve of independence.
Well, speaking of politics, how did you begin to think about what themes you would bring forward in this climate?
Yeah, well, so over the course of the year, we are thinking about a few different themes. So we have looked at these questions of history and memory. This past spring, we are currently focusing on ideas about place and community and the way that print culture and visual art helps people to visualize and to rethink their ties to the places where they live. And then finally, democracy and freedom later in the year. So over the course of the year, some objects are remaining constant. So Washington's library is on view throughout the year, but others are rotating in order to kind of give a sense of the range and the depth of the collection and the many different stories that it can tell.
What are some of the other, before we move forward, because as I mentioned in the introduction, you're also looking at the continuing conversation we have had with the notions of and the idealism of our country, but what are some of the other highlights that you might call out from our early days in this country?
So currently on view, we have this really wonderful print based on a watercolor by an artist named Christian Remick from 1768. And this image is called A Perspective View of the Commons. And it's a view of Boston Common in 1768, soon after the British regulars are encamped there. So you can see their tents, you see the military drilling, you can kind of imagine the noise that is taking place. You see groups of children watching them, but also just these amazing vignettes of people walking to and fro. You see, women on their way possibly to run errands or pay a social call, and they're accompanied by an enslaved Black servant. You see other Black laborers on the common. And it's, I think, this really incredibly vivid glimpse of Boston on the eve of revolution. It gives you a sense of how all of these different people who are witnessing these events, who are interacting with each other, who are part of this story. So I think that that's just a really wonderful example of how these objects can help us better picture this really important moment in American history, but also imagine the people who are part of that story.
Well, so often I know through prints, there is a very intentional story being told, too. If we think about Paul Revere's print of the Boston Massacre, this was intended never to be a framed work of art hanging in somebody's home for the sake of being a work of art, but it was intended to stir up people and to essentially act as propaganda, to have people understand the colonial cause. To what degree was that print or others you have in the collection a reflection of that being the social media of its day?
That is such a great question. And I think that Revere is such a great example of that process. But we see that not only with the kind of visual imagery of the revolution, but even with texts in print. So, for example, right now we have on view an early printing of the Declaration of Independence that is not, a huge broadside that is going to be tacked to a wall, and not even a newspaper, although we've had a newspaper edition of it on view as well. But currently we have one that it was printed as a pamphlet, and it's the size and scale of a book. So it's very portable. It's something that you can easily loan to a friend or a neighbor. You can imagine someone putting it in their pocket and carrying it with them. But it's this great example of how these really important ideas are being circulated through a lot of different forms. And there's a kind of intention behind that too, that it's being printed in order to spread the word as quickly as possible. And I should say too that the newspaper and magazine printings of the Declaration are also so fascinating. We have on view a printing from the Gentleman's Magazine, which was a London periodical from 1776, and the words tyrant and tyranny are rendered with a T with a dash, so that word is not appearing in print in London. But then there's the New England Chronicle edition, which was published in Boston July 18th of 1776. So in terms of, the pace of information, you're looking at not a 24-hour news cycle, but more like a 2-week one, where the news is being published 2 weeks later. But you also see alongside the Declaration text, you see all of these advertisements for, things for sale in Boston, the arrival of ships, a farm for sale just outside the city, as well as advertisements for enslaved people who have run away to seek their own freedom. So you can see this portrait of social life through this other copy of the Declaration as well.
I'm speaking with Reed Gotchberg, curator at the Boston Athenaeum, where Imagined Nation is on view through November 14th. Before we move on to the more contemporary pieces, what is it for you to be looking at these pieces and holding these pieces as you're assembling them, as you're at the Athenaeum right in the heart of Boston, and you can literally look out at the landscape that's being depicted or described?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I was thinking about how if I turn, we have George Washington's library on view in our Leventhal room on the first floor. And if you turn from the cases that showcase the library with the volumes bearing his signature and look out the window, you're looking out over the Granary Burying Ground, right? So you're really right in the heart of where so many of these events took place. And we're also just around the corner from the 54th Memorial, from the State House. And so that there's that sense of history really being all around us. And actually one of the figures whose work we're highlighting in terms of the 20th century piece of the exhibition is Alan Rohan Cricht, who is a Black Boston painter, printmaker, and he wrote this wonderful introduction to a sketchbook walking tour that he created of Boston's South End, which was intended to highlight the history of Boston's Black community in a neighborhood that was not being paid nearly as much attention to. And he talked about how everywhere in Boston, history is within walking distance, right? And so I think that idea has really shaped, some of the thinking around how we're highlighting these different layers to the story of the Revolution, but also to the story of Boston's place within it.
Well, Alan Rohan Cricht was a man who loved this city and loved the people, most especially loved the institutions like the Athenaeum, like the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. I know you both recently had exhibitions of his work. What was the significance for you of presenting more contemporary works and having a dialogue with how we're talking and looking at this country?
So one work that really kind of stayed in my mind as I was thinking about and planning the exhibition was this portrait by the artist George Deem of George Washington. And it's called Washington and His Portrait, and it shows this kind of imagined view of Washington himself standing in front of a portrait of Washington, right? And so you get this sort of double view of Washington, this very iconic vision of him, and yet at the same time this sort of wink, right? It's very playful. It's very directly engaged with this question of kind of the the real and the portrayal, the past and the present, and this relationship between kind of where we stand interpreting these works of art and how they kind of relate to our present. And so I think that idea, that interplay between history and memory and past and present, was really kind of shaping all of the works of this exhibition. And that painting is from the early 1970s. And, I was thinking about that in conversation with Washington's library, how we think about Washington interacting with Washington.
Well, it's funny because I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you're also talking about something the courts are wrestling with. How does today's society, how is it a reflection of what was being laid out by the founding fathers in documents and whatnot? As you're putting these pieces, these more contemporary pieces together with what you have studied and how this republic was formed and how it was presented and how it was given to the people, how do you look at what came of it?
I think that you can see this really long history of how people have been wrestling with that question, right? And it goes all the way back to, Paul Revere and the Bloody Massacre engraving that you mentioned earlier. And I think it, of course, before Revere as well, right? But you can see that long history of how people have been engaging with this question and how they have been challenging or kind of expanding that vision in different ways over time. I think that Kreit's images of Boston's South End and these efforts to add this layer to how Boston sees its place in the American story are part of that. Other examples of, how 19th century historians are coming back to figures like Phyllis Wheatley or Crispus Attucks and in terms of reclaiming the Revolution and its significance. You can see how that process has been going on for as long as this nation has been in existence. And so in some ways, I think it helps to offer a kind of context to the way that those questions continue to be debated and taken up in different ways at different moments in time.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. As you mentioned, we're seeing community and place, that emphasis right now, and then citizenship and democracy is up in August. In the minute we have left, what are the highlights? What will people look for at the end of August when that goes on view?
Yeah, so we will be focusing on questions of citizenship and democracy through, 20th century World War II era posters highlighting the importance of voting, early materials connected to the women's suffrage movement, as well as, other early portraits from the 19th century and beyond. So I hope that visitors will come by and see the exhibition and return throughout the next few months to see new items on view.
And as hopefully we've also highlighted, the building itself is absolutely gorgeous. And it has I can't remember the specific number, you'll tell me, it has a very Harry Potter-esque address on Beacon Street. What is the number?
10.5 Beacon Street.
I just love that. Almost diagonal from the State House. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I've been speaking with Reed Gotchberg, curator at the Boston Athenaeum, where Imagined Nation is on view through November 14th. Thank you again. Coming up, he stood for something and did it all while hoisting a boombox. We're talking about Lloyd Dobler from the beloved film Say Anything. But what happens when he's a midlife Gen Xer? Find out next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
Trade. Huge responses from across Europe, from the Danish Prime Minister.
Climate. Picture this all filled with ice.
Security.
Not only do we need to end the war, we also need to prevent the next war.
These are global issues, and to understand them, you need a global perspective. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. Join us for The World each and every weekday.
This afternoon at 3 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Cape Cod Foundation, committed to building resources to support community life on Cape Cod, including environmental conservation, arts and culture, and community development. Learn more at capecodfoundation.org. And Gentle Giant Moving and Storage Company, offering local, long-distance, office, and piano moving with 23 locations throughout New England and across the country. More information at gentlegiant.com. And New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill, a garden destination 50 miles from Boston. Visitors can discover summer with thousands of blooms, twilight experiences, art exhibitions, and educational programs for all ages. NEBG.org.
National media visits. We live here. GBH News 89.7, gbhnews.org, and streaming on the GBH app. Trusted local news.
I'm Jared Bowen. In Cameron Crowe's 1989 film Say Anything, Lloyd Dobler is 19, fresh out of high school, and staring down adulthood with no tidy career plan and no interest in selling out. What he does have is one very open heart.
I don't want to sell anything, buy anything, or process anything as a career. I don't want to sell anything bought or processed, or buy anything sold or processed, or process anything sold, bought, or processed, or repair anything sold, bought, or processed. You know, as a career, I don't want to do that.
It just reminded me, it's like Donald Rumsfeld's known unknowns and all of that. For Gen X, Lloyd, as played by John Cusack, became a patron saint of sincerity, especially in the scene everyone remembers, him standing beneath Diane Court's window, holding a boombox over his head, and trying to reach the dream of that earnest young man. Actor and writer Dennis Traynor Jr. imagines Lloyd decades later, older, grayer, and still refusing the program. His new solo show, The Tao of Lloyd, turns that Gen X idealism into a spiritual survival guide in an era of political collapse, cultural burnout, and late-stage everything.
Hey, I'm Lloyd Dobler. Yeah, the guy with the boombox from Say Anything. I grew up. America didn't. So I'm here as your resident Zen punk dissident with a sort of kind of guided meditation that is your spiritual Molotov cocktail to help you survive late stage everything. Are you with me?
Dennis Traynor Jr. will perform a workshop version of The Tao of Lloyd on Saturday at Western Avenue Studios and Lofts in Lowell. That's before he takes the show to the famed Edinburgh Festival Fringe in Scotland, August 6th through the 30th. Dennis Traynor joins us now to talk about it all. Welcome to the Culture Show. It's great to have you here.
Jared, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, what made you think about Lloyd Dobler and 40 years later what he might be thinking?
Yeah, for me, the Tao of Lloyd is for the spiritually curious, the politically furious, people who are algorithmically kind of overstimulated and who just can't pretend anymore that everything's okay or that another Joe Biden Democrat getting elected is going to save the day. So it's hosted by Lloyd Dobler, who I imagine as someone a little bit older, a little bit grayer for the radio people listening. That's who I am. Who is, again, offering these sort of kind of spiritual meditations to help us survive late stage everything. He says, using a spiritual Molotov cocktail to throw at the Overton window so that we can reimagine what is possible for the future. So it's earnest, but it's funny because he's not so good at the spirituality stuff.
Well, you point out something so key here, because you've done this in your podcast in addition to the show that you're about to launch, and that he is Gen X. And Gen X had a prism into what was possible.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm at the tail end of Gen X, we saw a world that for a long time went along pretty smoothly, and where it seemed like the boomers were doing things right, and these were the people who were doing the protesting that so many people want to see happen now. So it gives him a view of what could have been.
Yeah, I think Lloyd would say, and Dennis might say as well, that the boomers, before they were boomers, were hippies, and the hippies almost won. I mean, we were maybe one or two naked drum circles away from actually giving peace a chance, you know, but then Robert Kennedy was shot, and Martin Luther King was shot, and Malcolm X was shot, and John F. Kennedy was shot, and RFK was shot, and then, you know, to usher in the era of Ronald Reagan, John Lennon was killed, and then the hippies put their tails between their legs. And they became boomers, and we've been experiencing, Gen Xers, a kind of trickle-down trauma for the past 40 years, wherein, you know, we can say that Trump is a kind of cancer on American politics, but, you know, Obama bailed out the banks and the people got sold out. Bill Clinton was Bill Clinton. We went to war under Bush based on lies. So things for people my age have been getting worse since Lloyd said he didn't want to buy, sell, or process anything. So the refusal end of that is certainly understandable, but we need something. We can't just be against anything. We have to figure out what we're for. So that's the kind of razor's edge that both the podcast and the show are trying to negotiate.
And so we talked about what came before Gen X, but millennials come after. So where does Lloyd and Gen X stand in that sandwich about who and what is on the other side?
Yeah, hopefully Lloyd's smart enough to know that with the wisdom of age, he's kind of touched some experiences through which he can learn. But he's old enough to realize that he can't be the leader, or he can't be, as a cis white man, the kind of avatar of some kind of movement, that he can gather people together, harness some energy, and kind of get the hell out of the way, which could be a note for some people in the older generation as well.
So why say anything? Of course, that's one of a string of 80s movies, and John Cusack, of course, an icon of that era. Obviously, we know what he stands for, and that's a big part of the character, I would assume. But did you scrutinize some of the other ones before really landing on why this one resonated so much?
The honest answer is no. This idea has been bouncing around in my head for so many years before I finally launched the podcast just about a year ago this week. And it always seems so impractical. I mean, I remember being at a family gathering last summer, and my brothers were saying, "So you launched a podcast about, Lloyd Dobler, and he's trying to go through the Tao Te Ching and help us." And I said, "Yeah, it's a niche little audience. I understand, but I have to. For whatever reason, I had to do it. It was just something that was got me creatively. So I didn't market test this. I didn't go through that whole thing. But the producer who I worked with last time at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival became a fan early on and has been a great supporter and been encouraging me to take it beyond the podcast and develop it into a solo show.
Well, let's kind of walk through that, because before you did this, you did Manifest Destiny's Child at Edinburgh Fringe. Also political in nature. What were you examining there?
So Manifest Destiny's Child was largely a disappointment to the marketing department, not a show about Beyonce.
Yeah.
It was a show. It was the end of a long bit of phrasing that I used to use to critique U.S. foreign policy that went something like U.S. foreign policy is a blowback-inducing homicidal bull in a cultural, religious, and geopolitical China shop. Manifest Destiny's Child. It was a critique of American exceptionalism, both here at home, starting from the founding and the expanding westward, and then how that manifested in our foreign policy. But as an activist in around 2016, right after Trump got elected the first time, before he took office, there was a massive protest out at Standing Rock, in which I was part of as an ally and a storyteller. I had a camera, and it's part of what I used to do as YouTube. And I learned very quickly there through training.
That was about oil. It was about
stopping the oil pipeline. Yeah, it was a massive months-long encampment of this place that didn't even exist on Google Maps, and yet over 500 indigenous tribes came together, and an overwhelming number of many white allies who maybe some of us were kind of in the way. One of the things I learned in the media orientation there, Johnny Asseron, who was an indigenous leader, said to me, he said, "We thank you, white people, for being here, but please, if you're going to help us, just know there's not going to be a parade in your honor. This is not Dances with Wolves, and you are not Kevin Costner." So Manifest Destiny's Child, the play, was a memoir play that examine my own privilege. I could be against U.S. foreign policy, but as a cis white male, I'm also benefiting from those same policies that I'm critiquing. So the play it was a true story about my time behind the front lines of U.S. presidential politics. I was Jill Stein's campaign manager and communications director in the 2016 presidential race. But before that was a whole 10-year period where I was engaged in activism with Occupy Wall Street and other media creating events. So it was a kind of an hour-long investigation into that period of my life.
Well, you're already an actor, but how did you see the theater in this format is a great way to, one, marinate your ideas, and also to get them a different way other than a podcast or a radio show or punditry on the television talk shows at night, to get your discussion out there?
So I did the punditry thing. Actually, I had a show called Acronym TV, which means what do you stand for? So there's a little nugget there for the pun people. And what I found as a theater, and I was away from theater for all this time before I came back to it. And what I find with theater is that you literally are changing the air in the room with the people that you're sharing the room in. And it became a quality versus quantity. So yes, with a YouTube show that's successful, you can reach a lot of people, but how many of those engagements are real and how many swipe through? When you're on stage, you know if your audience is with you or not. And for me, that was my first love. That was what I was trained in. And I went away from it for a good decade or so, chasing all this activism stuff, which was is important. I don't regret that. But I'm happy to have found my way back into a Boston theater community where I'm still actively engaged in doing a couple of shows a year and teaching at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. So the reason I want to do it as a theater show is because I haven't market tested this, but that's where I feel most at home. That's where I feel most alive and where I can leverage my talents as a storyteller.
I'm speaking with Dennis Traynor Jr., an actor, writer, and associate professor of theater at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley, as he just mentioned. His new solo show is The Tao of Lloyd. It's happening this Saturday at Western Avenue Studios and Lofts in Lowell before it goes to Edinburgh Festival Fringe in August. For people who don't know, I've heard about this for years. I've actually never been myself. It's definitely on my arts bucket list. What does Edinburgh represent when it comes to theater?
Edinburgh Festival Fringe represent. There are 3,500 shows that descend on Edinburgh now across verticals of comedy, clown, dance, and theater. So even if, let's say, for example, I saw Hamilton when it was first on Broadway, maybe one of the biggest shows. Well, you can leave the theater after saying hi to Lin-Manuel Miranda and getting your picture taken with on the sidewalk and walk 2 blocks away and be in New York City. And all these other universes are opening up of people who have no idea what happened. When you're in Edinburgh in August, everybody is either in a show, working on a show, or seeing a show. So you leave, and you just the energy teeming of the streets. And Boston got a glimpse of the kind of celebratory energy of the Scottish people. So they are fantastic hosts, and it is a magical place to be during August. So I'm trying to figure out a network or a system where I can get back there as often as I can.
Well, if I remember correctly, last fall we had 2 shows in Boston that were birthed at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe theater landscape. One was at the Huntington, one was at the ART, if I'm remembering correctly. I know at least one of them was, because it does become a major platform and a springboard for getting into other major venues.
Yeah, Chris Grace's show went in the Masso Room. So Loretta, if you're listening, you should send your people and see the show in Edinburgh. And the Tao of Lloyd would really slot beautifully into the Masso Room at the Huntington Theater.
Well played, dear Huntington.
So no, it is. I mean, it is a launching pad for a lot of, Fleabag and Baby Reindeer started there. So, but it's also the kind of place where, because of the amount of shows, you can do a show to 2 or 3 people, one of whom's going to get up and go to the bathroom.
Has that happened to you?
It hasn't happened to me. We were very lucky. Like I had a great director and a producer lined up there last time, so we had a network of people, and I was very happy. We got a lot of great reviews. But you go to the artist bars afterwards, and you hear people say, "Yeah, we canceled the show today. There was nobody in the room."
Oof, that's painful. The other show, by the way, was 300 Paintings at the ART with Sam Kisajukian. We had both Chris Grace and Sam on different days about their shows. What was it to sit in front of an international audience as an American talking about American politics?
Well, it might come as no surprise that a UK audience actually is very invested and very knowledgeable about U.S. politics. It might be true that the best political theater in the United States is happening outside of the United States. There's a curiosity. There's they're horrified about what we're going through, but there's not a lot of finger pointing. I think that they understand where we're coming from, and who we didn't vote for. But they're very sophisticated. The Fringe audience is a very sophisticated audience. They're there for it is their Super Bowl. They're there for the Fringe. They're a knowledgeable audience. They don't, unlike Boston and New York U.S. audiences, they're not going to get up and do a standing ovation for every show. They're more discerning, so the laughs and the applause are earned.
Well, I want to go back to what you mentioned a moment ago about what we just experienced with the Scots here in Boston. We started the show talking about this with Amari Paris Jeffries, too. Just the joy they brought to the city, the respect they brought to the city, the help they brought to the city by cleaning up after themselves. what do you expect to find, or will it even be different for you to now be among them on their turf?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, again, it's my second time going back as a performer, but we've been going there. My wife and I have been going there. This is maybe my 6th or 7th time going to the Fringe, either as an audience member or as a performer. But yes, I will definitely let everybody in Scotland know that I'm from Boston. And for the people in Scotland listening, I expect a free pint of Tennent's at the bar.
By the way, have you ever met John Cusack?
I haven't met John Cusack. So in the kind of 6 degrees of separation world, a lot of my activist friends, some of them worked with Bernie Sanders, and John Cusack is very lefty, have reached out. I haven't heard back from him. I don't, as an actor, I wonder how much he would care or want to stay away from me.
That's why I'm asking, because I interviewed him for I can't remember which film. There was a film screening, and then I interviewed him after, and my whole conversation off stage, before and after, was all about politics.
Yeah,
that's what he cares about so passionately. That's why I think you would find yourself having to tear yourself away from him. That's how engaged he is.
Yeah, again, just because of my other foot in the activism circles, I'm 1 or 2 degrees away from him. He's been reached out to, and we'll see if he gets back to us.
Well, you'll keep me apprised of that, I hope. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations in advance on the show, both here and in Scotland next month.
Thanks, Jared.
August.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course, Dennis Traynor Jr. is an actor, writer, and associate professor at theater at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. His new solo show is The Tao of Lloyd, as in Dobler from Say Anything. You can see a workshop performance this Saturday at Western Avenue Studios and Lost in Lowell before the show heads to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, the famed theatre festival in Scotland, where it runs August 6th through the 30th. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Culture Show. Tune in tomorrow for filmmaker Rowan Haber on their new documentary that looks at the famed SNL character Pat and how anxieties over androgyny in the 1990s play out in 2026. Plus, Mahesh Das is here to talk about the impact of ever-expanding data centers across the country. The Culture Show crew is Max Chow-Gillette, Kate Dellis, and Chelsea Mers. Our engineer is Bill Piacitelli. Our interns are Adina Velasquez and Katie McCabe. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Jared Bowen. Have a great day.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
GBH's All Things Considered is coming up this afternoon at 4, with Marketplace at 6:30. But first, get a global view of the news with The World, up next, here on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Newbury Court, serving Concord, Massachusetts for 30 years as a not-for-profit continuing care retirement community dedicated to older adults. More at newburycourt.org. Frontline investigates how lax laws leave the for-profit adoption industry ripe for abuse and how so-called baby brokers have targeted pregnant women and families looking to adopt. Baby Brokers, tomorrow at 10 on GBH2.
You turn to GBH for the news you need to stay grounded and informed. GBH and NPR aim to get to the root of what the story is, not just what we think it is. Then, we report on what we learn. That's news you can trust. But we don't take your trust for granted. Every day, GBH strives to earn it through timely, fact-driven information and analysis. Support that commitment to clear, truthful reporting by donating today, online at gbhnews.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?